Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the stream. I'm SaSeshen. This week rather, we are going to try something a little different. Maybe it's not even that we're trying something different. I'm trying out different layouts. I'm trying different themes for the stream to really hit home the intent of this channel. It's not to be the next Hassan Piker. It's not to be Gremlo. It's not to be Redacted Tonight. It's not to be TYT or any of that. We will talk about the news. We absolutely will talk about politics. And we absolutely will talk about current events. But we are going to try and tie it into the perspective of leadership, governance, and actual policy from this office right here. What can we do? What can this office do to truly affect change in our country? And how can we see what is happening today and make changes so that it does not continue? Because let me be honest, the news that just happened in the past 2 weeks alone, never mind over the course of just the weekend, is egregious. These are life-changing, national direction-changing events. The petrodollar expired yesterday between us and Saudi Arabia. The Biden administration gave Ukraine permission to attack Russia. Brianna Joy Gray has been fired from the Hill for speaking up against Israel on behalf of Palestine. Israel attacked Palestine, which is again condensed in Rafah, killing 200 innocent Palestinians to rescue 4 hostages. It was also confirmed that during the school bombing last week, my apologies, it was confirmed that U.S. ordnance was used in that attack. And that's just the past few days, within the past 2 weeks since the Ukraine attack happened in May 30th. And things are only getting worse. Things are only getting more out of control. And it's just, when you see these kinds of events unfold and you look to your leaders, you look to your representatives, you look to industry leaders, you look to politicians and everyone else, you think, well, surely those are the people who can make a difference. Those are the ones who are making all the calls, calling all the shots. So surely they can get a handle on this, right? But in reality, because they're the ones calling the shots, this is exactly what they want. And the sooner we begin to realize that, the sooner we begin to internalize and intellectually accept that the way things are in the world are the way things are wanted to be, we can start addressing the real issue, which is the fact that we, as people, as a country, as citizens, collectively do not have the power that we should be wielding. That isn't to say we don't have power. We do. It's called the Constitution. It's protected by the first and the second, and I believe it's the 10th. Could be the 9th. Whichever one grants all of the powers not explicitly outlined in the Constitution to the people. And I believe that is the 9th Amendment. It's never been utilized, of course. It's never been called upon. But we have the power. We have the authority. We just don't have collective organization putting that energy to work for a common cause. And that's what's holding us back. You see, if one person protests, if one person cries out against injustice, if one person refuses to pay their taxes as an event to show that I'm not going to pay towards the military-industrial complex, if one person votes, if one person doesn't vote, right, nothing really changes because that's an individual. If a handful of people get together and protest or refuse to pay taxes or vote or don't vote, it starts to have a slight impact. Now, the more we get involved, the more we accumulate our efforts, and the more we direct those efforts to a common goal, the more powerful we become. And that is what this channel is about. It is about education. It is about highlighting that, yes, things are terrible. Things are not the way they should be. Things are not what they were promised, for sure. The United States being the most prosperous nation on earth. For whom? Certainly not the people. Certainly not the American citizen. It's certainly not when homelessness can be met with violence, arrest, and your last remaining worldly goods taken from you because you have no other place to be other than in public, on roads, under bridges, on parks, whatever the case may be. When debt can destroy your life, but getting medical care can't even save it. When getting medical care is the debt that is ruining your life, how do you choose which way to die? This is not the way the country should be ran. And it's certainly not the way I would run the country. And as you can see, as your future president, there are a myriad different ways that we can go address these problems. And I do have solutions, but I hesitate to be like the demagogues of our common era that say, I have the solutions. Follow in me, trust in me, and we will find the prosperity that we so equally desire, that we have fought for, that we have worked for, and that we have deserved. I can say with absolute certainty that universal healthcare, universal education, universal income, and universal housing would have an immense, immediate, long-term, long-lasting, beneficial impact on society in America. It would save us trillions of dollars in expenditures, out-of-pocket costs, and guarantee a minimum standard of living for all citizens. Not just a minimum wage, a minimum standard of living. And that is fundamentally what a country is supposed to provide, is it not? The barest minimum for its citizens. Of course, a prosperous country would do more than provide the bare minimum. And those come in the form of, well, whatever you want to look at it. Your spending power, what you consider a living necessity, right? The bare minimum to live is food, shelter, and clothing. But we have electricity, we have running water, we have telecommunications. We could build a international, transnational high-speed rail system, making travel that much more accessible. Could legalize marijuana, reintroduce it into the economy, make it America's #1 cash crop again, furthering the funding capabilities that we could instill in our country. Just simply standardizing the cost of medical care would dramatically reduce the costs of healthcare expenses in our country, which would prevent so many more people from going bankrupt and having to choose whether they die from the illness or die from poverty. And it's these things that prelude the world events that are happening right now, the decisions that are being made by our administration and other world leaders, business leaders, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to start this off with an address that just because there are dark things happening in the world, it doesn't mean that there isn't a light that we can shine, a light that we can build and work towards. There is always such thing as hope, and that hope is always built through community. And that is what this channel is about. So let's get to the topics. There are quite a few to go over today. So the first one is, how will Israel react after it's added to the list of shame? Again, Israel has been waging war against Palestinians who themselves were an occupied state to begin with and are now refugees in their own country. The entire population has been displaced into Rafah, and it had been promised that Rafah would be a safe zone, no strike zone, and yet parts of Rafah have been bombed further and further and further, condensing Palestinian existence into a smaller and smaller surface area, while the population still remains in over 1 million, almost 2 million people. Except there have been so many losses and fatalities, we don't actually know what the real population of Gaza is. What we do know is that the average age of those killed, the 36,000 plus that we have directly accounted for, is 5. That's right, you heard me correctly. The average age of death of killed Palestinians, of lost civilians, as some conservatives would like to say, collateral damage, was 5 years old. The age most kids start attending kindergarten, learning their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s. That is the average age of those killed by Israel and their genocidal tactics against Palestinians. It is, isn't it? And I'm not trying to be shocking and depressing. It's just that's what it is. And we need to talk about it. We need to be aware, and we need to start spreading this awareness. We need to start talking about Israel's atrocities, because if we don't, then we are literally no better than the Germans during the Nazi era in Germany, pre and post World War II. And if it helps to bring the perspective that that is younger than most people's children, or many people's children, or the same age as their children, or just within a few years of their children's age, perhaps that'll start sending the message. So this is 27 minutes, so we're probably not going to listen to all of it, because as I mentioned at the beginning here, that we have a lot of ground to cover.
Its ongoing war on Gaza. This is Inside Story.
And Al Jazeera, by the way, isn't just some random YouTube channel with, influencers and podcasters. Al Jazeera has won international acclaim for their coverage of the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. And they have lost many journalists in Gaza due to this Israeli aggression. So when we watch Al Jazeera on this channel, you can take that to the bank. Although we don't need this intro.
From Imogen Kemba.
15,000 children dead, at least 12,000 injured, and around 3,000 with limbs amputated. 30 children are reported.
Mind you that with their limbs amputated, this is without medical attention, as in no anesthetics, no numbing, no nothing. Like I don't know how else to convey that we have been desensitized to war with Call of Duty and Battlefield and all these other war games, right? You're shooting people, yeah, there's maybe a little bit of blood, maybe a little bit of violence. Maybe there's some games where there's a bit more gore involved, right? The Wolverine game where you can pick somebody up out of a helicopter and slice their head off from a helicopter rotor, and it's like, hee, right? Well, now imagine those not being pixels, and instead of enemy soldiers and combatants trying to fight you or take over your area and territory, it's children suffering those self-same consequences. That is what is being reported here, is that Israel is doing what we do in video games to the enemy, to the other player, to whatever. What we do in video games, and have been doing in video games, Israel is doing in real life to Palestinian children.
To have died from starvation, and 1.1 million are at risk of malnutrition. All in Gaza, since Israel began its war in October 2023. In an annual report, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has now added Israel to a global blacklist of countries that have harmed and abused children during armed conflicts. The decision angered Israel.
I am utterly shocked and disgusted by this shameful decision of the Secretary General.
And of course, the Zionists would feel that way, because it completely disregards the narrative that they have been painting for the past 70 years of occupation on Palestinian land. Israel is the proverbial good guys. They're the ones that can do no harm. We were the victims of the Holocaust. We established this country so that we could have a home. We can't do any wrong, except that's not true. They attacked Egypt in the 80s. They attacked us in the 60s. They attacked their neighbors throughout the Cold War conflict. They have engaged in displacing the Palestinian people, segregating, and yes, marking them with, I believe, I don't know if it was quite sleeves, but definitely identification, marking them as not Israeli and preventing them from driving on certain roads, accessing certain schools and hospitals. Israel has done to the Palestinians what Nazi Germany did to the Jews. And it has been going on historically since post-World War II, but it actually goes as far back as 1919, when the discussion on establishing a Zionist state first began. So the the audacity of Gilad Erdan, Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, saying this is unbelievable is truly, in of itself, unbelievable. They truly believe that what they are doing is the right thing to do, because Zionism is its own mentality. It's no different than the Crusades. It's no different than the Inquisition. It's no different than Manifest Destiny. And what has been done in the past continues to be repeated in the present, except now, instead of swords, bows and arrows, and very antiquated firearms and cannon, it's with fighter jets, mortars, tanks, assault rifles, and historical knowledge that the actions that are being undertaken are morally, ethically, and legally wrong.
Courtney, you know that Israel's army is the most moral army in the world. So this immoral decision will only aid the terrorists and reward Hamas. The only one who is blacklisted today is the Secretary General, whose decisions since the war started and even before are rewarding terrorists and incentivizing.
And this is the hallmark. That is the go-to solution for Israel administration when condemning naysayers or those who push back, is to condemn their actions as enabling and abetting the terrorist actions. When in reality, the only terrorist organization engaged in conflict in Palestine and Israel would be the Israeli military. Again, the Palestinians do not have a standing military. Hamas does not have a standing military. They don't have fighter jets. They don't have tanks. They barely have guns, if they have them anymore anyway. And even if they did, the overwhelming force of being backed by the United States military, being supplied by military munitions and armament and arms dealers and this, that, and the other, would make any conflict with Israel a preconceived notion of defeat. So why would Hamas try and fight them anyway? Well, that's the great question. Hamas is not trying to fight Israel or the United States. They are trying to reclaim the land that they lost and gain access back to their sovereignty, which they have a right, both upheld in the Geneva Conventions and by the United Nations General Assembly on multiple occasions from the 80s and the 70s, and also very recently since the October 7th attacks. So, as president, it would be not just my duty or my job, it would be my obligation to hold Israel accountable, to immediately stop arms, to immediately stop money, to immediately stop any sort of protections or support or resources that would aid or enable Israel from committing and carrying out these atrocities. And the fact that our administration waited until last week to say anything negative about Israel at all, demanding a ceasefire, and then immediately having Israel spit in our faces, is just a level of incompetence and, dare I say it, weakness that the United States of America cannot afford. So this is simply being added to the list of shame. There are, of course, other topics that we need to cover today, so we will get right into that. Unfortunately, still has to do with Israel.
At least 150 grand.
Has nothing to do with this guy. And yes, I would agree, Dre Romy, that they are a rogue nation at this point, and a nuclear superpower, which is exactly what we were worried Iran would come, or Afghanistan, or Iraq for that matter. And it's interesting because we waged a 20-year war in the Middle East to prevent rogue nation states from emerging, and yet we were the ones aiding, abetting, and supplying the existing rogue nation in the Middle East. The same rogue nation that was instigating violence and military action against their neighbors throughout the entirety of their existence. Not a single Middle Eastern conflict between a Middle Eastern country and Israel was initiated by another country. It was always initiated by Israel. Feel free to fact check me. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But unfortunately, history speaks for itself. And Israel has always been the aggressor, and they have always been backed and supported by Western powers, most notably the United States, although for a time it was France that was providing the arms and armament. And yes, the Israel won't sign the, I'm assuming that's the non-nuclear proliferation treaty. Exactly. They're not willing to sign that either. And again, as president, these are the things that you would want to ensure that your allies, especially your allies, would adhere to. At the bare minimum, adhere to the Geneva Conventions and human rights causes. And then, of course, the NNPT. The last thing we need is to proliferate nuclear weapons. Exactly, AZV, and welcome back as well. They did attack the USS Liberty then. I believe that was in the 1960s or the 1950s, which is ridiculous when you think about it, because they attacked the United States, claimed it was friendly fire, while they had already engaged in aggressing with Egypt, which they also promised they wouldn't do. So, again, Israel has a history of aggression. It has a history of being a bad actor. And what other definition could that be than in a rogue state? Now, this headline, 4 Israeli hostages rescued in military operation. Palestinian officials say killed over 200 Palestinians. So I don't know if this is going to actually get into that or not.
Outside of an Israeli hospital as 4 hostages taken in the October 7th Hamas attacks have been rescued from the Gaza Strip.
Noah, Almog, Andrei, and Shlomi were rescued after 246 days in Hamas captivity after they were brutally kidnapped from the Nova Musical Festival on the 7th of October.
The group taking their first steps on Israeli soil since being captured nearly 8 months ago. Their family and friends rushing to the hospital to greet them, along with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Now, don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. I am happy that the hostages had been freed. The problem here is that at what cost? Over 200 Palestinians were killed in this action, and Hamas themselves said they would turn over all hostages if Israel agreed to the ceasefire, a permanent ceasefire, and then released all of those hostages as well. Mind you, Israel has hundreds of thousands of hostages. Hamas has maybe a couple dozen at most, while trying to protect those hostages from Israeli attacks. This is the thing where propaganda, misinformation, and lies come into play. Israel has been attacking Palestinians in Rafah nonstop. They have been segregated throughout the Gaza Strip and condensed into Rafah and been attacked every single step of the way. Every single step of the way, Hamas has had these hostages, meaning every time that Palestinians were attacked, every time Gaza was struck down, every time a hospital was destroyed, every time a university was destroyed, that could have been an opportunity to slaughter their own hostages through friendly fire and lack of intel. It is literally a miracle that Hamas has kept these hostages alive, let alone themselves, let alone protected them from Israeli attacks and aggression. Because again, Israel doesn't want peace. They want the eradication of the Palestinian people. And these actions and activities, this freeing the hostages, is literally just a means to use the media as a weapon to prove the point that, oh, see, look, they're still holding our hostages and so on and so forth. But look at the hostages. They're well taken care of. Every time Israel has released hostages, they have looked far worse for the wear. All of it, Palestine is being held hostage by Israel, exactly. 200 people. Words cannot describe the rage that would consume a normal person when hearing this. And that's the thing. It should enrage anybody hearing this. Even American soldiers, Marines caught and captured by terrorists during the height of the war, not a single American citizen during that time would have been okay with 200 civilian casualties to rescue their soldier or their Marine. That's just not the kind of people we are, or rather, not the kind of people we were. The outrage of civilian casualty was very strong throughout the entire 20-year global war on terror in the United States. And so now we have been, again, desensitized to war. We've been desensitized to civilian casualty. We've been desensitized to the destruction, to even terrorism as a whole. And so now when we see a headline, 4 Israeli hostages rescued, we're like, yes! And we don't care about the rest of the headline, which won't even show up on the YouTube video itself.
This harrowing footage made its way across the globe, depicting the moments the hostages were abducted. Israeli officials saying they are all now safe and healthy, a message U.S. President Joe Biden is pleased to hear.
We won't stop working until all the hostages come home and a ceasefire is reached. That is essential to happen.
Israeli officials say it took a specially curated military operation to bring the hostages home.
Specially curated military operation that still resulted in 200 civilian casualties. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a specially curated mission. That sounds like an excuse to go in, lay down some bullets and cover fire, slaughter anything in your path, and rescue the 4 hostages you knew where they were. That's terrible intel, terrible planning, all for a headline and a victory lap during an atrocity that is being committed by the government.
One the country's defense minister is calling a proud moment for Israel.
This is one of the most heroic and impressive operations I've seen during my 47 years in the security system, IDF forces, special police forces, and security services. The fighters and supporting units conducted a mission that cannot be rivaled.
But Palestinian authorities say the operation came at a great cost to civilians in Gaza. According to Gazan health authorities, at least 210 Palestinians were killed and another 400 injured in the operation, which saw Israeli strikes touch down in a central Gaza refugee camp. Local medics in the Strip say this is the single most deadly day Palestinians have seen over the course of this war. Israel.
I don't know what else to say to that. The single deadliest day since October 7th, when their entire population was uprooted, their homes literally bulldozed, the dead crushed alive, every single hospital, every single university destroyed. And this was the single deadliest day that Israel defense ministers and whatever else are claiming was one of the most incredible military operations their country has ever engaged in. What does that tell you? It was not about the hostages. It was about creating as much possible destruction and creating fear, which is the exact definition of terrorism, fear for political purpose, against Palestinians since the start of this war, which has already claimed over 36,000 dead Palestinians whose average age was 5 years old. This, when we talk about war crimes, we will hear about this war, this conflict, and this date, the date of this mission, to be compared to places like Auschwitz and other concentration camps during the Nazi era. That is exactly how devastating this attack was and how devastating this conflict continues to be. When you open comment sections on this, you find Americans saying, womp womp, cry about it. There is nothing more vile than this. Tell what other than violence can answer to this evil and the apathy of many Americans. Not you, of course, and most leftists. We're a country of bad actors, sadly. And honestly, that's what I'm saying. We have been desensitized as a country. And then when you add to the desensitization, you add right-wing conservative ideology, and I will say conservative ideology. There is right-wing ideology that is fiscal, that is economic, that is infrastructural, institutional, right? Talking about regulating, bridges and taxes and, making sure that businesses have a say in their own operations, right? That would be your traditional conservative arguments. But once you start heading towards nationalism, authoritarianism, corporatism, or fascism, any of those isms that I just mentioned, we are basically a Venn diagram that circles all of them with a very strong overlap, but not quite completely obliterating our democracy, because allegedly we still have free elections. But all of that speaks to the underlying problem with the people who would say such things like womp womp when being met with 200 people dying. It's for Americans, for the empire, if you will. It does not affect us in any way, form, or fashion. I could never turn on the news again and never know that 200 Palestinians were murdered, 400 were injured, and that 4 hostages were rescued by that military operation, which no military commander would or could authorize because it would violate way too many Geneva federal, national, and military regulations. So, when I say that these people react that way, it's because they think they're being edgy on the internet. It might not be because they're completely apathetic and evil and cruel. It just doesn't matter to them. They do not care because it does not affect them. And all they want to care about is having their moment on the internet of riling up the people. And there are studies about this. There are so many studies about the lack of personal fulfillment, which can often be correlated to a lack of intelligence, IQ, as it's most commonly placed, and the correlation to this kind of cruel acting out on the internet. It's not so much that they care or they want or they desire these negative things. It's for them, they can capitalize on it, trying to fill some emptiness within themselves by angering people around them. And unfortunately, that is a growing number of Americans, a louder number of Americans, but still a very large minority, a very distinct minority in our country. So I wish I could say more. I wish I could say something more reassuring. The apathy, the complacency of the general populace, though, is hardly any different. It doesn't impact us. We can simply choose not to watch the news. We can watch sports. We can talk about Clayton Clark and Angel Reese, and we can talk about sports, and we can talk about music, and we can talk about movies and video games. We don't have to talk about the news. We don't have to talk about politics because it doesn't impact us. It's not quite narcissism. Again, it's it actually sounds more like depression, but with sociopathic tendencies. America doesn't even understand how detrimental this is to its imperialist ambitions. They have alienated everyone in my generation. I'm currently 20, and when people of my age become leaders, we will definitely side a line more with the likes of Russia, China, Iran, etc. I'm talking about the entire Middle East, not just my country, and I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Why should the Middle East trust America? Why should the Middle East rely on America? Why shouldn't the Middle East engage with improving relations with Russia and China or shoring up existing relations? What has the United States proven in the past 30, 40 years? 5 years. That we are not allies of the Middle East. And that we are using Israel as justification to commit atrocities in the Middle East, maintaining our foothold of fear in the Middle East. To keep Middle Eastern powers down and out and subversive to American policy, foreign policy, right? Because it's no accident that Afghanistan's government is still unstable. It's no accident that Iraq's government is still unstable. It's no accident that Saudi Arabia was our number one trade partner. But now, after the petrodollar has lapsed, who knows what our relationship will be. And it's also no accident that our relation with Iran has eroded over the years, thanks to Israel and the Cold War mentality between us and Russia. I've been saying for a while that the fact the U.S. has been involved in so many wars abroad, but we haven't had wars here, in the mainland since probably the Civil War, has made Americans very callous. I do believe you're correct. I don't think there was any sort of engagement here other than terrorist activity. And some of that was homegrown domestic terrorism. No one in my demographic trusts America. Our blood is cheaper than water to the USA. And I agree. I could not make a single argument that this administration or any previous administration valued the Middle East in any way, form, or fashion. And sure, I can sit here and say, well, Saddam Hussein shouldn't have been gassing his own people, and Gaddafi shouldn't have been doing the same to his people. But when you start peeling back the layers, was this really happening? To what extent? How much of it was propaganda? How much of it was misinformation? And then when you look at what we got from invading Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Syrian civil war, you realize we got more oil reserves, we got more gold reserves, we got more natural resource reserves that we don't have in the United States, or we can just add to our own repertoire. Which is why, as the future president of this country, it will be one of my foreign policy goals to dramatically improve relations with the Middle East. Of course, there's limitations there as well. Just because I want to improve relations with the Middle East, because I made it to the presidency and I made it to my second term, that's 8 years of peace. That's 8 years of friendship that we can potentially rely on in the Middle East between the United States. What about the next guy? What if after my presidency, whether that's in 2028, 2032, or somewhere else down the line, what if the next guy is another Trump, another Biden, another Obama, another Bush, another Clinton, another Daddy Bush, another Reagan, a Nixon, God forbid? If we cannot maintain those relationships, we will never regain our standing in the world. And so whatever we do as a country, however we do it as a country, it has to be with the backing of the people. And the people have to be active in their government. They have to be active in their political processes. Otherwise, the leadership, whether that's business, whether that's political, whether that's something in between, is irrelevant, because that trust will not be there, because the American people will be too easily swayed or too apathetic to give that certainty that those actions made by those leaders are sincere and long-lasting. And that is what is different between me running for president, me being in the Oval Office, we having the chance to make history in the current trajectory of this administration and the 2025 through 2028 presidential cycle. Back in 2011, I read an international survey. They asked people around the world what was the number one threat to world peace, and the number one answer by a wide margin was the United States. And unfortunately, that is true to this very day, 13 years later. So I think we covered Israel there. Now we're going to have the validity on the channel of covering the fact that it was U.S. ordnance.
Official says a U.S. bomb was used in the deadly attack on a UN school in Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says 12 children were among the 40 people killed. The school was a makeshift shelter for thousands of displaced people. Israel counters that 20 to 30 Hamas fighters were inside the facility and that the munitions targeted only part of the building. The White House has been adamant that Israel needs to be more precise in its military campaign to reduce casualties among innocent civilians.
Well, that was the whole thing.
This news is funded.
So, I mean, we can just, go through the entire 3 hours and just kind of circle around and get riled up. I know I'm getting riled up. But as that previous video showed, there's evidence that the United States has been now, if not before, but now directly responsible for the deaths of at least 12 children and 40 total Palestinians. Squish Chin, Sam Ronan, I haven't seen you in a few years. I didn't recognize the new channel name, but I saw it was you. Good to see you live streaming again. Thank you. Yeah, I've gone through some iteration. I think I was POTUS for the people. I might have been Ronan for progress. I might have been, what else was I? Gaming for the revolution at one point. So I've gone through some iterations, but at the end of the day, I'm already a public figure. I've already been on CNN. I've already had my fair share of death threats. And in fact, in the short amount of time that I've been back to streaming, I've already had somebody try and dox my address. So at this point, I'm going to wait the 2 months from when I switched my name to SaSeshen, which is a cool name, by the way. I'm going to share it with you here in chat real quick. That's what SaSeshen means, by the way. It's a pretty cool name. I actually spent some time trying to look it up and see what it means, but and I think it's relevant. Egyptian for protector of the lotus or guardian of rebirth. I think that is a very strong name. It's a very powerful symbolism at the very least. Ronan for progress is the one that sounds familiar. Yeah. Like I said, I think I'm just gonna go Sam Ronan. Maybe I will go back to Ronan for progress. I don't think it actually let me, though, interestingly enough. I just wanted something easier to say, or just shorter. You know, XQC, Asmongold, Hassan, right? Those are like usually 2 syllables or an acronym, and I just couldn't think of one that didn't dox my real name. But at the same time, I'm not worried about my real name getting out there. I intend to run for president. I intend to use this channel to get there. I intend to use this channel to build an infrastructure for people to utilize to get their own electoral processes underfoot, or to at least engage in their civic processes. I'll get right back to you, Squishton. Countries in the MENA that are aligned with the USA, like mine, are monarchies and only aligns with the USA to protect the monarchy, not because of the people. Of course, this includes Saudi Arabia and the UAE. That makes sense, and don't doubt that at all. Also makes sense. It sounds like SaSeshen, so it's a clever interlingual wordplay. Exactly. And that was kind of the intent behind it. I still think it's a name worth keeping, but it gets confusing when I'm trying to share political content and it says www.samronan.com anyway. You know what I mean? Not to laugh during a serious topic, but you get where I'm going with this. So I am back. On Friday, and I guess throughout this stream, I'm also going to have to announce that I'll be at Origins next week in Ohio. So my stream will be disrupted. I am going to try streaming the convention instead. But that's obviously not my core content. My core content is politics, not conventions. So I'm debating on whether I should even stream because I will be there from sun up till sundown as a booth vendor there. So yeah, I am back. I am streaming full time. Well, not full time, obviously, 3 hours, but I will be streaming 4 to 7 Monday through Friday to the best of my ability. I will have 2 interruptions, one next week that might go into the week after as well, and then another one in August. But after that, it's going to be SaSeshen or Sam Ronan or Ronan for Progress until we can start actually building these things, which kind of goes to another point before we continue on with Amy Goodman, I believe. I think that's who this is. It's Democracy Now!, but I don't remember her name right off the top of my head because I'm a terrible person. But yes, the goal is to build more than just social media, just more than a Twitch presence, right? Because then I could just be playing Age of Empires or something, right? I genuinely want to build an infrastructure that helps people get engaged in their civic community, their civic duties and obligations. So when are you running for president? Well, funny story about that. I actually threw my name in the hat in the Republican primary because the Democrats weren't holding one. But I was a little bit too late to the game because by the time all of the debates had been issued and organized and all of the requirements were met, it was like December when I finally was able to start putting resources into campaigning, and I had hoped that those resources would like trigger a dark horse phenomenon, but given my politics and stances and the way our media is, that was not going to happen. And so I missed out on getting on the debate stage. I had hoped I could have hit a minimum threshold to get on the debate stage. That had actually been the goal, which is one of the reasons why I'm building a social media platform now, regaining that lost platform from 2017. But to answer your question directly, I do intend to run as soon as 2028. My hopes and goals are to facilitate a social media platform across Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, so that there is enough organic growth and reach that I can meet as many people as possible from either ideology that at least know who I am, so that when I make such an announcement, there will actually be some momentum behind it, rather than, having, a few followers on either channel and not getting anywhere with it. I can't vote in the USA, but if I could, you would have my vote. Well, I appreciate it, and you have 4 years to get citizenship. No. But I do get that a lot. Not just if I could vote, but like if you were on a ballot in my state, I'd vote for you. And so I don't say that I run for office lightly. I don't say that I am engaged in political activism lightly. I've debated at the highest levels of our country. I was running for DNC chair. I changed the entire trajectory of that entire campaign, that election cycle. And that was with just 5 minutes of speaking time out of a 3-4 hour forum. So I know I have the capability. I know I have the chops. I know I have the presence for it. I just don't quite yet have the credentials or the recognition for it yet. And that's what we're building here. I'm being open and upfront, right? Hassan, he's just trying to be an entertainer. Grenlow, he's just trying to be an entertainer, right? All these people are just trying to be entertainers with their own degree of seriousness, of course. They're trying to present information. They want, that information to get out. But their goal isn't to run. Their goal isn't to lead. Their goal is to just get their information out and make some money. Social media is the way to go, man. It is. I agree. I, however, suck at it. I am what's known as a boomer millennial. And that means I know I'm pretty good with technology, except for some things. And for me, that some things is social media marketing. I've done sales, ironically. I have a small business. I don't know how to market. So streaming and social media in general is my attempt at learning how to market and how to cultivate an audience genuinely, generically, organically, and truly build a community, which is, of course, cliche on Twitch because everybody builds a community. But rather than a chill community, this is going to be the revolution community, the community where we start a labor movement, where we start a workers' movement, a civil movement to take back our democracy. That is the intent and goal of this channel. And hopefully somebody watching now or sometime down the road can certainly help me get there. Of course, viewing is wonderful, sharing is wonderful, love it. But if you know how to actually build a social media presence, let your boy know, because I don't. I still don't know how the DNC messed up so much to let you slip through the cracks onto the debate stage. They regret it, but I will always remember that legendary move on your part. Yeah, I appreciate that, and we'll hit that in a second. Just so that you guys know, part of the problem is that it costs a lot of money to get on the ballot in every state. They wanted a corporatist. Now, that's true, Ocean. You bring up a valid point. It's $50,000 to get onto the ballot as a presidential candidate in Texas. It's $25,000 in Florida. And I believe it was something egregious like that, too, in some like random state like Idaho or Oregon or North Dakota. It was one of those states, and it was still like several $1,000s. No, it was Alabama. It was Alabama that was $10,000. So just to get on the ballot in most states, you'd need a cool $250,000. And that's not even signature requirements. That's just money. Some states require signatures, which is fine, of course. But we're talking thousands of signatures and then in triplicate on top of that, which means unless you have a lot of volunteers all over the country, you're not getting on the ballot. And that's the other problem. We don't have a fair or equal electoral system either. Now, some states like New Hampshire, you can either get signatures or you can pay to get on the ballot, which is interesting. And it's a very low cost to entry, too. It's $50 to become a congressional candidate. Now, some of you might ask, are you going to do that? I haven't decided because I'm also trying to leave New Hampshire. So it would be kind of awkward if I paid my $50 to run for Congress and then left before the primary was over, right? So I'm still waiting for confirmation of if I can do that and when. But regardless, there are barriers to entry, and that's the major problem. Money dictates most electoral outcomes. And to Squishchin's point, it's one of the reasons why it was so shocking I made it into the DNC debates at all. Even when I showed up at Phoenix and I demanded to speak to the secretary and demanded to be recognized as a candidate, they could have just said no. And that's one of the reasons why they created the rules that they did at the time, that you had to be present in at least 3 debates in order to be on the CNN debate. And I was like, interesting, because if you had said all 4, I would have raised holy hell to get on that stage, and they knew it. So yeah, the party kind of screwed themselves by letting me on there, because they probably thought I was just some ragtag kid, because I didn't dress like this. I dressed up in like a regular gray sweater from Kohl's and blue jeans. So they were like, okay, whatever, we can let this guy on there. And then I opened my mouth and like, oh my God, we made mistakes. Mistakes were in fact made. We can play some clips, maybe not today, but we can play some clips throughout. Or maybe I can have like a highlights reel on the channel under the About Me. It's like a highlights reel from the DNC debates. I don't think you're as bad as you think you are. You have good stage presence, and I think most people will find you reasonable. He's good on stage. Thank you. Yep, very good speaker. I appreciate that. That's why I said I'm not worried about being a candidate or even sitting in the office. I'm not worried about that. I've been there, done that. I have faced the most powerful, or the second most powerful, however you want to look at it, political party in the country, and didn't blink. In fact, I made them say things on national television that they did not want to say. I put Tom Perez in a corner by bringing it up. And then I crushed him on national stage on CNN when I talked about the rigged primaries, and then talked about how the entire party rigs its electoral systems and primary systems regardless. And of course, they argued in court for the same thing. And now both parties are basically behind the scenes doing the same exact stuff they did in 2016, rigging their own primaries, but being very, very hush-hush about it. So, again, I am intending to build this channel and social media presence not for my own benefit. I do not give a damn about making money off of Twitch. In fact, I hope you rather donate to me instead so I can put that towards the nonprofit, which would be what political parties are, what these political organizations have to be, right? I don't want to be for profit. It would make me much happier to have 30,000 donations, monthly donations, focusing on building infrastructure rather than having 30,000 subs, because I only get half of that anyway, and it's taxed and it's for profit. Yes, you did that. That was awesome. I was squealing with joy. Yeah, and I'm sure they could hear you all throughout your home. I haven't seen your debates. I'd love to see you react to it on Twitch. One reacting to my own debates. I can do you one though. I can certainly help you there with that. Let's see. Let's see. Sam Ronan debate DNC. We'll go ahead and just put that in the chat. So I believe you can just click on it in chat, right? I think you can click on it. I don't want to accidentally. All right, I'll hit view now, but okay, I'm muted. All right, good. My channel's muted on my screen, so that's good. But yeah, I think you can click on. I'm gonna post it again just because I'm not certain. I'm a boomer. Remember that. Why won't it let me post in chat? That's weird. Okay, well, I don't know then. Either which way, doesn't really matter. Click on that, and that is the all of the debates that I've been in. That'll be good entertainment for sure. But live commentary, yeah. I've done live commentary on the Republican debate. Didn't get me very many views on YouTube, but it's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out with this channel, right? If I want to build my presence as president, then is it perhaps more correct to do this screen instead? You know, talking about the issues, you know, like instead of like, okay, so we're going to play Amy Goodman, I believe is her name. And we're going to play, or at the very least, I know it's Democracy Now! So we're going to play Democracy Now!
By viewers like you. Please support our... And then, because you're in D.C., Omar, talk about the Biden administration response.
So, and then it would be like, all right, so she says that.
Amy, there's no question that what unfolded in that
Oman says
operation
something.
is a massacre. I mean, we've seen just the bodies of hundreds of people littered everywhere, including the bodies of children. We've seen absolutely horrific scenes at the hospitals of weeping parents and bloody children. I mean, to look at a death toll of this scale and then to celebrate this kind of operation as some sort of success, you would basically have to openly say that the lives of Israelis are more valuable than the lives of Palestinians.
And then would I address that commentary on this screen and be as mortified and disgusted as probably all of you are? I mean, what Oman just said is correct. If you see that much devastation, that much destruction, that much loss of Palestinian life, not least of which were the children, right? Not least of which were the fact that these are all refugees in their own home, in their own country, what's left of it. They are still being attacked to such a great disparity that there are 400 casualties, 200 fatalities, and Israel is celebrating 4 hostages. That would literally mean that one hostage is worth 125 Palestinian lives. I have no words for that other than disgust, because to me, as someone who has served in the United States Air Force, someone who would be happy to lay down their life again for their country, no civilian casualty is ever worth it. Is it going to happen? Sure. And sitting in this office, I might one day issue an order that might cost the lives of an innocent person. But the difference between me and this administration or any previous administration is I wouldn't just call the family members of the U.S. Soldiers who lost lives. I would call the families of the foreign citizens who were innocent bystanders and innocent victims of my orders, to give them my condolences and offer any help and support that the United States could offer, because that is the moral thing to do. I don't know what else to say. And okay, so back to the playlist briefly. Yeah, playlist of favorite political videos. Well, that's good to know. Maybe instead of the Be Right Back screen, we'll just have my highlights reel playing. Maybe you can share that with me, Oshun. Or share it in the chat or both or something. And then I can look into making that integrated in some way. So we'll go back to the
human rights organization in the world is describing Israeli conduct in Gaza as war crimes. They are describing the deliberate starving of children. Several of them have died of starvation as well. We are witnessing that the International Court of Justice is effectively has found that Israel is possibly committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. And in light of all this, for the Biden administration to continue providing unlimited and unconditional military funding for Israel to carry on this genocidal slaughter in Gaza while expressing regret at the fact that some civilians are dying in the process. I mean, just who are they fooling? They are responsible for it in a direct way.
Which is also true. And the phrasing matters. There have been a few civilian casualties. 600 in no way, form, or fashion is a few. We could go and be a little nitty-gritty on the internet and look up the definition of a few, and you'll see that it's more than a couple, less than a dozen. 600 casualties, 200 fatalities. That's not a few. That is entirely too many. And that cost is not worth paying for the lives of just 4 hostages. No military commander should make that call. No military commander should authorize that call. And no government should call 600 civilian lives a success or a few unfortunate deaths. So I think we
of that ceasefire proposal. There has long been tension between the Israeli position, which is effectively a temporary ceasefire, a return of all the hostages to Israel, and then a continuation of the war, of this onslaught on Gaza that has so far killed nearly 40,000 people and just destroyed the overwhelming majority of the Gaza Strip. And the Hamas position, on the other hand, they're saying they're willing to give up the hostages, but they need an end to this onslaught. They want a permanent ceasefire. And
so remember, the terrorist organization that is being flouted left, right, and center across every single Western media and social media stream, these heartless, soulless, barbaric terrorists known as Hamas are more than happy to give up every single hostage. They just want guaranteed end to hostilities. Does that sound like a terrorist organization to you? Or does that sound like a freedom-fighting organization that is trying desperately to stop an aggressor from erasing their people and homeland? Now, I'm going to end up going right back to this scene, and it's going to continue playing automatically, but we're going to pause, and we're going to move on to a different subject, because this is actually making me angry. This is making me very angry, because again, as someone who has served, someone who wants to serve their country, who thought they were serving their friends and their neighbors and their family, seeing our administration, our government, the commander-in-chief, aiding and abetting literal genocide, and then dismissing the deaths of hundreds of civilians does not sit well with me. And if I were in this office, one of the first things I would do is send this administration, not the president, not just the president, the administration, straight to The Hague. And everyone who supported this atrocity in Israel, straight to The Hague. And every industry leader, straight to The Hague. And yes, every journalist, every single pundit, every single YouTuber, every single person who has been aiding and abetting or supporting this war effort and spreading the misinformation of lies would be charged and held accountable. And that would be quite a few people. So obviously, to the lengths and depths that they could be held responsible for their actions. Oh, I'm just a YouTuber. I only have 100,000 subscribers and only 300 views per video. I wasn't aiding and abetting. Cool. You're permanently banned from social media. You have the right to free speech, not from consequences for your actions. So let's, I guess, carrying on with the warmongering of our administration,
we want to thank you so much for being.
We can talk about the fact that the Biden administration, and we're going to do an article this time, the Biden administration has partially lifted ban for Ukraine to use American arms in strikes on Russian territory. So this went from a pseudo proxy war to an actual proxy war. We'll give you the guns and the bullets and the everything else. You fire them, and then we can say it wasn't us engaging in military conflict with Russia. So, again, I guess I don't know what else to say on that, really. President Joe Biden has given Ukraine the go-ahead to use American weaponry to strike inside Russia for the limited purpose of defending Kharkiv, according to 4 U.S. officials familiar with the matter. The officials who requested anonymity to discuss the sensitive matter underscored that the U.S. policy calling on Ukraine not to has not changed. Oh boy, they're not allowed to use missile systems, just small arms. No big deal. Biden's directive allows for U.S. supplied weapons to be used for counterfire purposes in the Kharkiv region, so Ukraine can hit back against Russian forces that are attacking them or preparing to attack them. Again, as far as foreign policy goes, I Off the top of my head, I'm not entirely certain Biden ever served. He was certainly not deployed, because if he were deployed and if he did serve his country with distinction, then he would never, ever instigate conflict unless it was the last possible option to save as many lives as possible. And this ain't it. Fueling a proxy war with Russia ain't it. That is not how to keep peace in the Middle East or in the global theater at all. You may as well authorize Taiwan to use U.S. armament against China. Like, what are you doing? That's not okay. U.S. foreign policy is basically, let's attack everyone and everything and be shocked at the consequences. And that's just unacceptable. So again, as president, that is the exact opposite that I would do. And again, as far as war crimes are concerned, or as far as instigation is concerned, I would absolutely hold this administration accountable. And I think I had multiple articles pulled up just to showcase that it's not just one article that's saying it. CNN and Politico also corroborate that Ukraine is being armed by the United States and being tacitly supported by the United States to go egress into Russian territory. I think we could potentially actually do something slightly lighter than the war and the violence that we've been touching. No less egregious, unfortunately. But many of you maybe not be tech savvy or as familiar with what's going on with Microsoft, but they were trying to initiate what's called the recall program. Why is this? Is this really transparent? That's interesting. That's different. That's difficult to read. So I won't read that. I'll read it off of here. After weeks of being excoriated by cybersecurity experts, Microsoft is making moves to address concerns over its new AI-powered computer history-saving feature, Copilot Recall. And what that basically is an automatic AI feature that screenshots your desktop every so many seconds, stores that information, and sends it to Microsoft as well, which could then do with whatever it pleases. It also makes your computer extremely vulnerable to hackers and outside threats. Meaning, not only is your privacy being heavily invaded by a private organization, hackers could then just as easily use not just that information or gain access to that information, but the backdoor that program creates is extremely vulnerable to hacking in the first place. So, if, or rather when, Microsoft engages in rolling out this program, every single Windows 10 and 11 user on the planet will have their entire digital, what have you, very much so weakened and vulnerable to threats. So my suggestion is to have all your stuff on a backup drive and to encrypt that drive outright. And then maybe that'll protect your data. I'm not a data engineer. I'm not an IT specialist, but those are the advices that I'm seeing from those who are. Now, bringing it back home, as president, what could I do about this? Holding corporations accountable is absolutely something that the president and or the federal government could absolutely do, whether by executive order or by passing legislation. And anything that violates our privacy is something that I am fairly certain violates the Constitution. Crazy, Fourth and Fifth Amendment there, right? And therefore, an executive order would not be out of the realm of possibility to cease and desist this kind of behavior, and issuing a hefty fine against Microsoft, which is obviously a $1 trillion company at this point, something in the form of billions as an extra tweak to the nose that they never do any such nonsense again. AZV, I appreciate that. And that's kind of the point, right? Is that a lot of the debaters that are lauded on the internet, streamers, YouTubers, whomsoever, right, always laud the Ben Shapiros or the Tucker Carlsons or there's some on the left too that get really animated, right? And just basically spout off at the mouth. And that's not debate. And there's some nuanced leftists too, but then they either get talked over or they get riled up. And don't get me wrong, I can get riled up too. And then they just get spit on by their opponents saying, see, look, emotional lefty, or this is why we can't trust the left. They're too in their emotions and their feelings. And it's like, yeah, well, we actually care about the survivability of, 600 Palestinians, 200 who will never breathe again, laugh again, cry again, get angry again, eat again, see their loved ones again. That should make you upset. And if it doesn't, you are literally a sociopath. And then, of course, there's the logical fallacies, right? I love how many debaters are like, well, prove it. Where's your source? Fine. Prove me wrong. It's like, well, I did. Well, you didn't because I said so. It's like, okay, buddy. I don't know how to tell you otherwise, other than showing you the data, showing you the facts, and you're still ignoring it. So at this point, you're just being obtuse. But that's okay, because I've shown that you are wrong, proven that you are wrong, and it wasn't difficult to do. So I'm also hoping to get invited on some of these panels, especially the Piers Morgan podcast thing. My goodness, do I want to tear that man a new rear end, because he is one of the most disingenuous podcasters with a large following who hails himself as a journalist when he's spouting right-wing rhetoric and propaganda and then inviting a stacked panel to use the only leftist as a punching bag. That's not debate. That's certainly not panel discussion. That's bullying at best. And that's unacceptable. Go ahead and try that nonsense with me. I intend to be leader of the free world. I intend to rebuild our foreign policy, our domestic policy. I intend to restore the trust in the United States federal government at home and abroad. So please come at me with that nonsense. It would make my day. So, carrying on the news, CNET was another one. Might actually be visible, but we'll just move along to the petrodollar being... I hate these damn paywalls. Okay, so this is going to be coingape.com. That's certainly reputable. Unfortunately, the ABC page is a paywall, and there's a myriad of historical articles out there right now and events that highlight that this deal wasn't going to be renewed by Saudi Arabia. So how Bitcoin will benefit from the end of the US-Saudi petrodollar deal? I guess Pierce is a fool. He thinks anything is real, does it correct by default. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. They live in their own universe, and as long as it comes out of their mouth, it doesn't matter what evidence they're presented, which is funny because he tried using that against a different panelist, but when it's done to him, he does the same exact nonsense, so it's ridiculous to me. The true steal. In fact, yes, Bitcoin is still a thing. And again, real talk. Let's see, there we go. Real talk. I intend to be president, right? So part of the things I'm going to have to deal with is cryptocurrency regulation, or at least legislation. My personal beliefs is that it is a decentralized technology that happens to have value and therefore has no business being regulated by the federal government at all, never mind being taxed. Now, that's going to sound like a clarion call to all the billionaires and grifters and schemers, like, hell yeah, let's get this guy in office, because then we can just make free money, manipulate markets to do whatever we want. But, I mean, unfortunately, if you really think about it, that is exactly what cryptocurrency is. It is a technology. Yes, Bitcoin is worth $60,000, $70,000. Yes, it is a store of value, but it's also a transactionary network. It's a technology that crunches numbers. And by crunching those numbers, it stores information in perpetuity. And then that network can be used for any number of things, transmitting data, communication, X, Y, and Z. We do regulate the internet, we do regulate telecommunications, but we don't tax, your internet speeds, right? We don't tax you do pay a telecommunications tax, sure, but that's more of like a business tax. Anyway, you get where I'm going with this. So, but to call it a security, which is the main point of this conversation, is patently false, and the SEC is losing their battle with XRP, which has proven that it's not a security, and Bitcoin less so, and many other cryptocurrencies, especially meme coins, are not securities. So we have to talk about that to talk about this next part. Cryptocurrency isn't going anywhere. It is something that can be exchanged for value, but so can Pokemon cards. Are we going to tax the crap out of Pokemon investments and Magic the Gathering investments? That sounds pretty stupid to me. But then again, the federal government is trying to tax any transaction over $600. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to simplify the tax code, and we need to hold the wealthy accountable, not so much the little person, right? I don't give a damn if you sell your $600 first edition Charizard on eBay. Keep your money. Congrats, you got it. I don't care if you made $1 million selling Bitcoin. It's decentralized. You take all the risk with all of your money on a decentralized exchange for a non-security asset. That is all you. That is 100% you. It is no different than gambling in the auction house on World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, Diablo 3 when they had one. It's the same exact thing. Is the federal government going to regulate the auction house on World of Warcraft? Is that really what's going to happen next? Come on. Now, I'm sorry I missed your statement there. You have to beat me in the race. Are you running for office? The True Steel? Are we going to be... Should we be hosting a debate sometime here soon? Apparently, you can stream together now with Twitch. Let's see, what is that called? Literally stream together. Do I need to send an invite to you? Let's see, collaboration is better with stream together. Next. Backstage activity will be recorded for safety. Got it. Get started. Use your microphone. See, now I'm not sure if that's going to disrupt this stream. But I'll hit get started. So I guess, let's see. Oh, add your browser sources to include any stream together session you join on your own. Okay. I guess we're not going to be streaming together because that is going to be its own thing. But, excuse me. If you're still watching, I want to know what you're running for. What race do I have to beat you in? Now, where was I? Bitcoin, yes, still a thing. Again, not financial advice, but personally, I'm invested in cryptocurrency, and it has done me a lot of good. But the same could be said about anybody who's invested in the stock market 20 years ago and didn't pull out. You're doing pretty good. Obviously, take what risks you're willing to take and never spend more than you can afford. That is the only investment advice that I can give, because I'm obviously not a financial person. But I personally am in it, and I think it is a way to generate personal and generational wealth. And as president, I would like to pass legislation that protects, a little bit for the retail investors especially, but to tax it the same way we treat the stock market, knowing how much corruption and whale and influence, like Elon Musk saying Doge to the moon, and then everything goes up 10% and then immediately back down 20%. I think we do need to have those discussions, but I do have a problem with taxing retail investors trying to get in on something that's decentralized. I think trying to get your grubby little mitts as the government into something that is literally decentralized. Nobody owns Bitcoin. People own Bitcoins. Nobody owns Bitcoin, if that makes sense. It's not a business. It's not an entity. It is not a service. It is not a product. It's not a government. It's not an institution. It is a technology that has teams working on it. Sure, but even those teams can't manipulate the value, the infrastructure, or anything else to do with it. They couldn't even delete it if they wanted to. It is decentralized, and that word for a reason. Let's see. I have to become president to protect Pluto from NASA. NASA keeps saying it isn't a planet. That could be your campaign slogan. Protect Pluto. It has a nice ring to it. You know what? I think you and I need to have a conversation. We'll have a debate, a true presidential debate about the issues that matter. For one, every time NASA has called Pluto not a planet, hasn't there been some sort of detrimental climactic event occurring on Earth, whether at the United States or anywhere? I mean, aren't we dealing with locusts and plagues? Our land aflame? I mean, I feel like we shouldn't piss off the god of death, especially not the Roman god of death, considering America is often referenced as the new Rome. Just throwing that out there. Of course, I think if you and I had a debate, we wouldn't disagree on too terribly much, so maybe I could take the disingenuous role of being the devil's advocate. What cryptos have you invested in? I am planning to get into it soon. I will be honest. My crypto investment strategy is to invest in coins that are less than $1. That's my strategy. There are some that are more than $1 that I invested in, but they are top 20 market cap, like Ethereum Classic, Atom, and I think those are pretty much it, honestly, that are worth more than $1. Nope. Filecoin is another one. But yeah, I'm in Dogecoin, Stellar Lumens, NKN, Algorand, Spell Token, Anchor, Shiba Inu. You betcha I'm in the Shiba Inu. I have 1 billion of them suckers, so watch out. You'll know if I got rich from crypto because you'll be seeing my face everywhere. And instead of having a green screen and a poor 4K camera, I will recreate the Oval Office and I will stream from that directly. But yeah, my portfolio has a bunch of shit coins in it, if we're being honest. Pangolin, Shipping, Maple. I guess XRP isn't a shit coin anymore. It was. Basic Attention Coin, Swift Coin, Fetch, Loopring, VThor. I have a bonk. I have a bunch of lame coins, shit coins, if you will, right? My coins, I like investing that are less than $1 because if I spend $1 and I get 1 million of something and it ever becomes $1, I've just made $1 million. And it's also because I keep kicking myself that I couldn't get into Bitcoin back in the day because I was too ignorant, foolish, or lazy to research it. And it never occurred to me to just type in bitcoin.com or bitcoin.org to see what popped up. Because apparently, in my 20s, I was an idiot. Shocker. You won't need to stream if you got that rich. No, that's not true. That is not true. I think social media is the most influential way to reach millennials and Gen Z. All right. Did my stream drop real quick? Is that what just happened? I hate this. You would never have to worry about my stream dropping again. I can tell you that right now. Yep, offline. Outstanding. Outstanding. I love this. Yeah, I would have a fiber optic internet connection. I can assure you of that. Come on. Let's go back to going live. All right. Looks like we're live again. Sorry, just talking to my team. I do have a team. It is growing. It is a crack team, but you know, we are also struggling with resources. Why is my computer acting this way? There we go. All right. Are we back? Hey, all right. Thank you, Drea. All right. First, founder. Hey. Bits leader. Oh, my goodness. All right. Okay, so I'm muted there. That's good. All right, so everything's going good now. We're back. All right. Anywho, back at the ranch, as they say. Did I just get raided? I don't know. That would be great, though. Are you kidding me? You're going to try and ads me right after I lost my freaking stream, you freaking bastard? I am so sick of Twitch forcing you to do ads. I would not run ads at all if I didn't have to. Again, I didn't become an affiliate because I cared about the money. Even if I made it to partner, I don't care about the money. I'd rather you donate to the campaign because that's tax-free money that I can put towards building resources and infrastructure. Running ads ruins streams. It just ruins them. And I'm not going to try and manipulate you into subscribing to my channel just so you don't have to watch ads. That's why I only do 30 seconds of ads per hour, because I do not care about ad revenue. I don't even care about subscriber revenue for that matter, because I only get half of it regardless. Once we get to a point where we have, scores or hundreds of viewers, yeah, I might start talking about donations. Yeah, but I'm going to tell you exactly where that's going to go. It's going to go into building infrastructure. It's going to go in building the app. It's going to go into building courses. It's going to go into disseminating those courses and that app. It's going to talk about establishing some volunteer system, helping others get print material for their door knocking or for handouts or whatever. Like, I'm not going to get rich personally from streaming. That is not my goal. That is not my intent. It would be nice to do it full time and be able to pay my bills with it. Sure. But I'll be upfront at that point. If we're getting, 1,000 subs at $2.50 of revenue, that's $2,500, right? Am I dumb? No, I don't think so. So 2,500 is still not enough to survive here. I'd have to get 2,000 subs. So I guess if we made it to 2,000 subs, I could cover my cost of living, and then everything over that is my pledge, I suppose. I'll say it now and I'll say it again, especially the closer we get to that. That 2,000 sub mark is when we can start divesting from keeping clothes on my back and food in my tummy and focusing on building, which is, again, why I would rather it go to the donation, because that's out of my account anyway. All of that to say, welcome to the channel. I guess you came on a very interesting topic. We're talking about cryptocurrency. We just got done talking about Palestine. If you are pro-Israel, this is not the channel for you. If you are pro-war in Ukraine and engaging in conflict with Russia, this is not the channel for you. That isn't to say that we're pro-Russia, pro-China. We are absolutely pro-Palestine. But what we are not is pro-warmongering. This is a very left-leaning channel. That isn't to say that I won't have discussions with conservatives or allow you to have your say. That is your right. And as your future president, I would continue to protect those rights. Just remember, the First Amendment guarantees you freedom of speech, not a freedom to a platform, and most certainly not freedom for consequences. And that is the part that often gets twisted. Well, you can't silence me. Sure, I can't silence you, but I can deplatform you. And if what you say is, reprehensible, discriminatory, racist, or inflammatory, guess what I can do? Consequences. And on this channel, that would most likely be banning, which womp womp, right? To that end, back on topic with the cryptos, Bitcoin seems to be where the crypto or the petrodollar is going to transition from. So not the United States transitioning from petrodollar to Bitcoin, but Saudi Arabia. Now, why is that significant? Several things. This is a 50-year-long deal between the United States and Saudi Arabia. And it created a very strong partnership between these two countries. But obviously, we spent the next 40 years shitting in the Middle East and making life miserable for everybody in the Middle East. So it's no surprise that Saudi Arabia would not want to continue that partnership. Now, what will it mean for the US dollar? It literally was the petrodollar. It was literally backed by oil, or rather, oil was backed by the dollar. Without that, I can imagine several things are going to happen. First, gas prices, they be going up. Second is inflation is going to increase as either the dollar plummets in value, but companies are going to try and maintain profits because they're certainly not going to lower their value. And then it'll be much more difficult and expensive to travel abroad. Those would be my immediate takeaways. The reality is all institutions have a form of speech regulation. Wait, what does the petrodollar... it ended yesterday on the 9th. So this article should be legible. Here we go. In a post on X, Dr. Prophet... Again, I apologize for this article, but this is across the New York Post, ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox. This is across all of the major networks. So this is just the one that happens to load without a paywall. VFRO. Speech regulation doesn't mean disallowing people from sharing their legitimate opinions about a nation's policies or social trends. Exactly. By all means. You can share whatever opinions you want. Absolutely. You can say Israel sucks. You can say America sucks. You can say America's great. You can say Israel's great. That's not the problem. It's the problem, right, is I was just following orders. Well, we have the Nuremberg trials about that. So no, you weren't just following orders. You were committing atrocities. Well, when I said I hate women, I didn't mean it like that. It was just supposed to be a joke. Well, your words influenced hundreds of thousands of people to assault women. So what is the US dollar backed by now? Funny you should ask. The US dollar has been backed by the trust and faith of the United States of America. And that is a very interesting topic of conversation. Fiat currency is currency that is not backed by any other asset or traditional material like gold or silver. Fiat currency is backed literally by credit and by the well-standing of the country with said credit. The dollar is a dollar because we say it is. It's worth a dollar because we say it is. And the Federal Reserve, which is not a government entity, but rather a conglomerate of all of our country's major banks, they are the ones who dictate to the federal government what and how much money can be printed with regards to inflation, interest rates, and this, that, and the other. And the federal budget is sent to the Federal Reserve to be like, hey, we need to pay for this. And the Federal Reserve says, okay, maybe we'll allow you to do that. And then the federal government, the Federal Reserve tells the mint to print the money. And then the federal government buys the money from the mint to government organizations from the banks and then owes the banks. That's literally how fiat currency goes. In a nutshell, in a very broad nutshell. Now, I understand some of the reasons why you'd want to do this, right? Because if politicians could control the flow of money, you would have hyperinflation like that. But at the same time, it's a private organization controlling our nation's currency and lending rates for everybody, not businesses, not corporations, but for retail lenders or borrowers like ourselves who need to buy a car, who need to buy a house. And now interest rates are 8%, which is going to indiscriminately harm the working poor and the middle class significantly more than it would the wealthy who already have enough money to spare. And that gets into other economic stuff, which isn't necessarily my specialty, but also beyond the purview of this particular stream. A simple way of putting it, the dollar is based on economic transactions within and outside of the country. If people stop using the dollar, its value is extinguished. What other nations have fiat currencies? As it turns out, the European Union, and I believe most other countries, I think. Like, there's very few countries that still have their currencies backed by gold. So how many countries have fiat currencies? Let's see. Well, Investopedia is a pretty good source, but it's not giving a straight answer. What currency is backed by gold? That seems to be the shorter list. Wow. Okay, here's a good one. Let's copy and paste and read together, folks. So, wait, so the US dollar is just as speculative as Bitcoin now? Yeah, and it has been. That's the other joke, is that the US dollar, stocks, and basically money in general, especially now in the digital age where it's all credit and online banking, has all basically been reduced to cryptocurrency as speculative digital assets. Like in your bank account, if you have $10, it's not in your hand, it's on your bank account. If that shuts down, you don't have $10 anymore. Just like if the internet completely got erased and couldn't get back together again, Bitcoin would lose all of its value too, because it's digital. You have no ways to utilize it. You can't bite it, you can't interact with it. That's why people say gold is worth so much. But again, gold is a metal that can be mined from the earth and isn't just unique to planet Earth or even our solar system, but arbitrarily at some point in our species history, we decided that shiny rock was worth something, and that other shiny rocks were worth other amounts of money. Bottle caps have just as much value if you choose to assign value to it, and that is exactly why I think the entire discussion about the economy is pointless, because. And I guess we can go right back to this screen. The economy is a joke. It is made up. It is literally made up numbers. It is a made up fantasy of numbers and sums and rules that do not exist anywhere else other than in our own heads and imaginations. Without money, we could still have running water. We could still have electricity. We could still have the internet. We could still make things. We could still build things. We could still take raw material and turn it into a finished product. Money is literally a medium of exchange agreed upon by 8 billion people. It is not the means by which we can actually function as a society. And I get that. I want to sit in this office, and I'm going to run for this office one day, and I will be sitting in this office for realsies. And I'm saying this, that money serves no practical purpose other than to deal with other countries and as a form of exchange that we can all agree upon. But as a tool, as a resource, as a thing of holding value, it is completely made up. And that's not me saying it. That's literally every single serious discussion about economics. Pretty much all trade powerhouses. Now that I think about it, my country's currency is fixed at 2.6 per US dollar, so I guess our currency is fiat as well. You'd be correct, and that's pretty scary. It's like a magic trick or a weird spell they put on everyone, which is funny because, again, the US dollar coin is tied directly to the US dollar value. Same thing with Tether, same thing with DAI, same thing with quite a few stable coins. But now with the petrodollar going away, how's that going to happen? I have $10 in US dollar coin. I hope I don't lose it. But that's the thing, right? All these countries are now trying to adopt cryptocurrency. Now there are banks that are trying to adopt cryptocurrency. And is the federal government going to disappear overnight? No. Is our economy going to collapse because of this? Probably not. It's just going to cause some pain for the working class over the next few months or weeks, or maybe nothing at all. Maybe nothing will change. Especially since everything is digital and commoditized anyway, and we say it's worth whatever it is anyway. The problem is, if we continue to lose the trade war with China and Russia, that's when we start suffering, because then the capitalism, right, the exchange of capital, starts to deteriorate. And again, it's because we made it up, so we're adhering to its rules and losing the game because we're too stupid to recognize that if we're going to be the strongest economy, we also have to play nice with our neighbors, and we can't just be a powerful military influence that threatens everybody and a good trade partner. You can't have both. That doesn't work. Eventually, people start seeing through it, like they have been, and eventually one or the other becomes too insidious, the military, and then it starts disrupting the trade, causing massive, destruction for the process itself. You will sit in the Oval Office, otherwise we're so screwed. I mean, the worst that could happen is that there's just global economic collapse. And then people will all cumulatively realize we've been bamboozled with this thing called currency and realize we've never needed it, and we could produce everything that we need, that we throw away more than we actually use, and that we could actually sustain a population of 20 billion or more with current processes, with current space, with current living conditions, with current construction and transportation and technology as it is. We could sustain 20 billion people on Earth easily. But that's how much we waste because of money and profit and economy and capitalism. So all that to say, yes. Gold standard is a monetary system where the government links the value of its paper money to a stock gold reserve. Under a gold standard, the government defines $1 to be a specific weight of gold and so on and so forth, right? But then again, the value of gold changes too because of stocks. You can trade gold. And so your gram of gold would be worth $1, but then a gram of gold or an ounce of gold becomes $2,000. So now that gram becomes that much more worth, and then your dollar becomes that much more worth. So does that mean you have more spending power with that dollar? Or does that mean the inflation that followed that dollar is now evened out anyway? It's just, again, it's all made up. Who said gold was worth anything in the first place? Who says real estate is worth anything? Who owns land? Who has the right to buy and sell land anyway? That it is all a made up construct. And there it is. Under a fiat money system, a dollar is just an accounting unit. A dollar bill is no longer made redeemable in gold or any other asset. However, paper money is stipulated as legal tender. That is to say, people can legally pay their debts, including taxes, using paper money. So paper money circulates because it is convenient as a payment instrument, and it can be used to discharge debt. How is it possible to remove money out of the equation when dealing with different countries? I personally believe the world will become one nation at some time. Possibly then can money be taken out of the equation. Okay, so again, it's an intellectual discussion to say that money is pointless and useless. It is, but it's a discussion, it's a debate. It's something that I, as president or the United Nations, couldn't just overnight and do. Why? Because we've relied on it for 12,000 plus years. Exchange of currency for goods began with bartering. I had a shiny rock. You had headphones. I want headphones. You want shiny rock. I give you shiny rock. I get headphones, right? Don't ask me why I have a shiny rock. I really like obsidian, okay? I'm a nerd. I'm weird. I don't know. But anyway, it is common sense to exchange something for something of value, right? So in our past, it used to be tools or skills or labor, right? And now it's just money. Money is now the exchange used for skills, tools, or labor. And in the future, it would more than likely go back to, this is what the society needs. We need your tools, resources, or labor to accomplish it. So it goes actually back to the barter system without actually needing to barter, right? You would probably still have grocers and shelvers and logistics and packagers and fast food employees, and you'd still have engineers and doctors and lawyers and everything else in between, right? You'd still have all that. But instead of engaging in, a cash monetary exchange, you would go to the grocery store, you'd fill up your basket, you'd scan those items to account for the stock and inventory, and maybe the cashier would be the one that does that, right? Like, okay, cool. All right, cool. And then it would be, here's your stuff. You put it in the grocery cart and you're done. And now the inventory has been accounted for. Theft isn't necessary anymore because, it doesn't cost anything. Now you can get your means. That ends poverty. That ends hunger. That ends starvation. That ends housing crisis. That ends lack of access to internet and resources and tools. It It eliminates access to transportation, to education, to healthcare, right? So until you have social safety nets in place, you couldn't even begin to transition out of money because you have too much reliance on the concept of money in the first place. Now, in point of fact, most of my policies do revolve on improving social safety nets and expanding upon them and creating new ones as the case may be. So fiat currency. Let's see. Bitcoin is the petrodollar.
Hunter Biden's defense team expected to announce today whether the
that looks like news. Let's see. Oh no. We were about to watch a video and I didn't even have my sound on. That would have been awkward. Did I seriously just drop my stream just because I turned on my speakers? Why does that even matter? God, I hate it here. This is why I run for president, because life sucks. Our economy sucks. The products and services that we pay for suck. And nothing is improving because it's not cost efficient. It's better to keep things sucky so that they can keep making money while we have no other choice but to give money hand over fist for the worst quality products that exist on this earth. It's absolutely insane. But I have to make sure I didn't drop my stream again. Because, of course. All right. I'm sorry. I truly am. This is one of the reasons why I'm trying to leave New Hampshire, is so I can find someplace with fiber optic internet. At least then, the bit rate shouldn't be a problem, and connectivity should be significantly less of a problem. Them's the ropes, folks. I am very sorry. Definitely not trying to cause this kind of frustration. I don't want to deal with it any more than you do. Let's see. Where were we? I think we were trying to, we were looking at other current events topics. Now, it looks like the Hunter Biden trial is another one that's coming up. But I think this one will be interesting. I think this one will actually be a little bit more interesting, and we'll be able to discuss
just how will Joe Biden pull out of the presidential race?
So, this video is alleging that Biden will drop out of the 2024 race, and if so, this is what would happen next. Now, this is Steve Forbes from Forbes Breaking News, I guess. But 3.14 million subscribers. I thought this was actually Forbes, like the stock people. So I actually don't believe that this has any true legitimacy. I don't see a future in which Joe Biden drops out of the election, but let's see what topics he brings up, because there's going to be the Hunter Biden trial. There's going to be the Trump scandal that is unfolding, right, with the crime and another trial. But Biden is aiding and abetting Israel and, of course, giving Ukraine the green light to attack Russia. So it's not like he's doing himself any favors.
Hello, I'm Steve Forbes, and this is What's Ahead, where you get the insights you need to navigate these turbulent times. President Biden's supercharged State of the Union address a few months ago quieted talk among Democrats about forcing him to drop his bid for a second term. But the quieting was only temporary. The continued, painfully obvious...
Oh, no, I 100% agree. Joe Biden is not dropping out. The DNC has already kind of done themselves in. By not having a primary, not allowing anybody else to build a presidential campaign team or staff or infrastructure, nobody could take his place regardless. Here's the thing, right? Oh, man, I love being able to switch back and forth. let's be honest, right? Somebody like me who is outspoken, somebody who has been on the debate stage, someone who has been in the Democratic national stage, I could run for president. I will be 35 on Inauguration Day. I'm a natural born citizen, and I've lived in America for, I think, the 12 years that it requires, 15 years. I've been here. I have all the eligibilities checked off, right? But realistically, how would I actually run for president, right? Even in the Democratic primary. Like, I could announce on Twitch to how many stayed with me? 5. We got 5 viewers currently. I can announce to the 5 of you, put it on YouTube, maybe get another couple, dozen there, do a few shorts across TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and whatever, maybe reach several thousand people. That does not make a presidential campaign, right? So even somebody like me who would run, who would have a very good presence and ability to impact the hearts and minds of the American people, people like you and me are not going to get access because we don't have money, we don't have resources, which, don't get me wrong, is one of the things I advocate against. We need to take money out of politics. We need to have publicly funded elections so that the everyman can run and get elected and have a fair chance at getting elected sometime again in the future. Between Trump and Biden, who's worse? Truth be told, that is a difficult question to answer because on the one hand, we saw what a Trump administration did. And on the other hand, we're seeing what a Biden administration is currently doing. And the Democrats love to say, well, if we get Trump, we're going to have concentration camps. It's like, okay, but we have Biden, and he's literally aiding and abetting the slaughter of Palestinians and genocidal actions by Israel. What's the difference? Oh, and he just signed an executive order making it impossible to deal with the border crisis and annotating or limiting the amount of people who can get in and creating a bottleneck at our border, which is only going to make it more profitable for the unscrupulous to get asylum seekers to the front of the line. It's like every decision this man makes our country worse off than it was before. And you can talk about Build Back Better, you can talk about the job numbers, and you can talk about the inflation rate. But the reality is Americans are working more jobs than ever before. The cost of living is skyrocketing before our very eyes. The end of the petrodollar happened under his watch. He could have fixed it. He could have resolved the relationship between Saudi Arabia and America and didn't. And I wonder why. And that's true. We do have concentration camps at the border. Literally, those detention centers at our border, they are no better than concentration camps. The only thing is that we're not massively euthanizing the people there. We're just neglecting them, malnourishing them, not giving them medical treatment, access to water, clean clothes, any of that. Oh, and we're separating the children from their families, which is exactly what the Nazis did. And then we're rotating those stolen children into the foster care system and losing record of where they are. So in many ways, we are worse than the Nazis because we're profiting off of it, and we have a historical reference to know better, and that is currently happening under Biden's watch. So, who's worse? Difficult to say. Very difficult to say. And it's even harder to say which one's better. They are both equally bad candidates, and it's the fact that those are the two frontrunners that we have to choose from that makes me sick, physically ill. And the next one up, RFK Jr., who is also unfit for office. And the next one up after that, Jill Stein, who is a member of the Green Party. The same Green Party that does not have a central organization, the funds or resources to mount an effective campaign, or the communication to launch down, up, and parallel campaigns, slate campaigns, if you will. Green Party, it's better off now than it was before, don't get me wrong. but it cannot hold a candle to the Democrats or the Republican Party. So even though she is the best candidate that we have, we can't reach her because too many people, again, are so focused on this bipartisanship that they don't realize that does not vote is the largest voting bloc in America. And if those does not vote would just all go in for Jill Stein, she would win by a landslide. By a landslide. Yes, they call them temporary immigration facilities. They're just not death camps. But then again, it also goes, and that goes back to the immigration. If you're coming to the stream, they're not death camps in the traditional sense, but people have died in them. And people have died within days or weeks of being released as well, which is more or less the same exact thing. Excuse me, my throat's dying on me already. I might be good at public speaking, and I might want to get in front of the podium and be on debate stages, but I have a renewed respect for streamers who do this for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Because obviously they're engaging for that most of that time. There's very little silence. Right? Unless you're watching a video and waiting to react to it. For the most part, these people are talking for 10, 12 hours straight, and that is rough. If immigration is an issue, why not give the kids back to the families and send them back to Mexico? So that is what happens, quite frankly, is a lot of deportations happen. But the problem is, there's such an influx of migrants that it can't be kept up with. And then those who are seeking entry into the country legally are also too much for the government to handle. So the actual solution would be to hire more workers, more government employees to handle the applications and streamline the process than do literally anything else. If we kept our structure the same, but increase the personnel and streamline the process, we could handle this process, this border crisis, ethically and morally. But instead, we continue to ask for more soldiers, more ICE agents with guns, and to limit how many can be processed, which only exacerbates the issue. Like you. I didn't say anything about you. You're not an immigrant. Goober. But yeah.
2024 will be remembered.
Oh, that's right. We were watching this guy.
Mental decline of our commander-in-chief has revived widespread public.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to be ageist, and this is going to be really mean, and this might be held against me when I run for president again sometime, but like, bruh. You look like you're as old as Joe Biden. I don't know that you should be talking smack. Oh, yeah. Honestly, I wish I had your vocal cords because, damn, I'd probably actually consider streaming longer, honestly. Lighting notwithstanding.
Speculation of his withdrawing. A few observers think that this might be the political equivalent of a head fake, lowering expectations for his upcoming debate performance against Donald Trump. That highly anticipated verbal slugfest is barely 3 weeks away.
So he brought up the debate between Biden and Trump, and I've already said my piece on how pathetic it is. Those are the two frontrunners. But it's the fact that, is Jill Stein going to be on this debate? Not that I have anything positive to say about RFK Jr., but is he going to be on the debate? If we're just not even going to allow the minor party candidates to get on a presidential debate stage and literally silence those voices and just make it between the two geriatrics who have no business being in power or office or anything resembling leadership, a stage for 2-3 hours to basically old man fight each other? Like, because I don't even know what's going to happen. Are they even going to be able to string coherent words together? I doubt it. I doubt it. I think what we're going to see is the most staggeringly depressing debate in American politics history. I think both of them are going to have moments of just... And they're going to focus a lot on personal attacks. They're going to get confused. They're going to get upset. It's going to be awful. It's going to be like going to an old folks home, dementia care, whatever, and patients getting into arguments with each other. That is exactly what our debate's going to look like. And I have no doubt about that. Trump seems less demented, to be honest. Have you watched any of his rallies, any of his speeches? Have you watched any of his full interviews recently? They're not all there. And again, I'm not making fun of them. I think this is elder abuse. And I think their cognitive abilities are deficient and their faculties are waning. And that should be enough reason to be removed from the race in the first place. Granted, what do we get if we don't get Trump? We probably get Nikki Haley. What do we do if we don't get Biden? Maybe Kamala Harris. We're still screwed. We're still screwed as a country, right? But at least we have people who can make coherent thoughts, even if they're going to, continue on with the long sordid history of committing war crimes. He just talks more clearly than Biden, but Trump is also demented. That's true. He does talk more clearly, but if you hear the words that he strings together, they don't make much sense.
After all, there are rumblings of pushing Biden out before his Buffo State of the Union triumph. But the volume this time is more extensive and the tone more anxious. The fact that several Democrats, almost always off the record, are whispering concerns to the media reveals growing worries about this president's fitness to stay the course for this campaign. Hardly anyone believes he can navigate the rigors of a second term. This, of course, leads to basic
honestly, I am actually floored that he is still alive. To be honest, I'm not even saying that in a negative way. I'm pretty certain everybody thought Joe Biden would have died from old age, just died in his sleep. The man is getting, for every minute that he's alive, he's a minute closer to death. And with his faculties waning, it's not going to be quick either, more than likely. It's going to be slow and it's going to harm the country. And that isn't to say that somebody else couldn't just die in their sleep at the age of 40, right? It's an extremely stressful job. I might get a heart attack and die my second day in office if I got elected. Who knows? But at least for the time that I would be in office, I could make conscious efforts and decisions. Probably most people at that age are unfortunately demented. That's true. Kamala is probably the most surprised. No, listen, I'm not saying I would die. I'm just saying, your boy gets sleepy at night and I'd have to work on that. But I'm sure if I was able to campaign, I would have, staff and the money and resources to eat healthy and, sleep and not be disrupted all the time. Or maybe I would just be really sleepy and I'd be like, all right, I know you guys wanted a rousing speech, but all I got right now is universal health care, education, and housing. For the win.
questions. Will Biden bow out before the June 27 debate with Trump? Unlike his appearances these days, the president won't be aided by teleprompters. His unscripted remarks.
Okay. That's a very important note. The teleprompters, right? I do all of my public speaking and I do all of my recording, all of my video recording, shorts, long form, all of it, this stream, without teleprompting. Largely because I haven't found a teleprompter that would work, because if it's on the screen, I'd be looking right here, which is not in the camera. And you could tell that my eyes are not looking at the camera. And it's different if it looks kind of like I'm doing a news thing, right? But maybe I'd need a slightly different background. But if I was reading off of here, you'd know I'm reading off of something because I'm not looking at the camera. but I'm also not looking directly at something that you would expect me to be looking at, right? It's not like the room is rotated so that it looks like you're getting a side view. So I have yet to find a teleprompter that works. The other thing is, have you ever tried reading from a teleprompter? From moving text? That's tricky. That is super tricky, especially if it's not a sophisticated one and it's just, 200 words per minute, I guess, or 100 words per minute, whatever it is, or whatever you set it to. It'll be like, I don't know, let's find an article. It'll be like, if you can only read this fast, report U.S. bombs used in Israeli massacre of 40 in Gaza refugee camp. That's all the faster you can read. But it's going, report U.S. bombs used in Israeli massacre of 40 in Gaza refugee camp, and it's just scrolling, like you can't keep up with that. So it's an art to use the teleprompter, but it's also an art to be able to publicly speak off the cuff. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I have like 36 policies on my website, www.samronan.com, which I guess I didn't put on there. But I couldn't tell you verbatim what's on all of them. I could tell you where I stand on the issues, and I could tell you where I would be open to discussion with experts, and I think there's room for discussion, room for growth, room for improvement, right? I don't have all the answers. And in fact, there's things I want to change on my my policies page anyway. I just haven't had the time, right? I think instead of trying to advocate for a 40-hour work week and then having policies for a 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour shift, it's just kind of stupid. Let's just throw that out the window and call it a 4-day work week and be done with it. Let's just be done with it. We shouldn't be working 5 hours a day. We probably shouldn't be working, 5 days a week. We shouldn't be probably working 4 days a week. We should probably only be working 3 days a week, if we're being honest. And 8 hours is probably too much. Most articles that aren't being funded by bosses and middle managers state that productivity has only increased with the work from home, and that the 3 hours of work that does get done in an 8-hour period has also substantially increased with the work from home. So if we're only doing 15 hours of work a week that's productive, then maybe that should be the work week. When our former Sultan grew son of a bitch. I'm sorry. When our former Sultan grew senile, it gave corrupt ministers the opportunity to embezzle millions from the state. Corruption, yeah, that's a big one. You're a natural and don't need a teleprompter. That's true, but if I was giving something like the State of the Union, where it would be like a 30-minute speech with a lot of details and information, I would need a teleprompter. I might be smart, and I'm not underplaying myself. I am smart, but I'm not genius smart. I'm not photographic memory smart. If I were, who knows? I'd probably be a better coder. In Norway, they work 32 hours a week most of the year and even less in the summer. Again, other countries are adopting it. But then again, we're the only country that doesn't have labor rights, time off guarantees, sick time. Well, hell, we're the only Western nation that doesn't have universal health care or education for that matter. So when our economy is just so back-asswards, and our country's social construction is also back-asswards. It's all about individualism and independence when we're a communal species, for one. For two, we're a country, so we're not individuals. For three, corporations don't have rights in the Constitution. People do. So why do corporations have more protections in the federal law than people? It just, the list goes on. Let's see what this guy has to say.
Routinely and embarrassingly confused and garbled. Would a combination of anger, which might fuel a temporary clarity of mind, extensive rehearsals, and some exotic elixirs enable Biden to complete a 90-minute debate, especially since the likely moderators would be on his side and former President Trump might overplay his hand? Perhaps this is what certain White House aides and the powerful, highly influential First Lady are counting on. It's a high risk, however. A fumbling performance would make a subsequent pullout.
He's talking a lot of trash, but he's not wrong about anything that he's saying. But I want to point out the teleprompter. He's clearly reading facing down, but the problem is The webcam, right? That whole situation. I've never managed to get a good viewing angle from the webcam where I was looking down and to where it would still make sense to how everything was. I mean, I get that, like, if I was sitting at my desk, there would be a camera right there that I'd be staring at. I wouldn't be looking up unless the camera was up, right? But even then, the teleprompter in front of it, like, I'm trying to spatially figure this out. Like, I think this would be the more natural look, but I don't think this would be more natural. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. The nerdiness is catching up with me.
Even if Biden makes it through the June 27 challenge, his continuing decline in public and private meetings will fire up ever-deepening misgivings among voters, knowing a ballot cast for Biden would be a ballot cast for Kamala Harris, sooner rather than later for her to sit in the Oval Office. When Biden steps down, who would replace him and how?
All right, so he's just going on that tangent. So that was just speculative. I thought he had, like, a real source. My bad. I make mistakes. I'm still working through the kinks of being a streamer while also trying to talk about the issues in a constructive and productive way. But he didn't bring up anything that we haven't talked about already, so I think we can move on to something else.
6 decades ago, a bunch of oil-producing countries...
OPEC. Whoops. I don't think we did... we read the article, but now we're going to have some video.
6 decades ago, a bunch of oil-producing countries, including Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, banded together to form OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And that cartel has had a massive influence on American politics ever since.
Oh, my goodness. That cartel? Seriously? You are a syndicated news anchor. You can't say stuff like that. What the hell? Oh,
Look
my
at what happened
God.
after OPEC decided to put an embargo on the United States during the Arab-Israeli War of 1973.
This winter, Americans waited in line for gasoline that they sometimes couldn't buy. They conserved fuel and turned off lights. They paid more for oil, food, clothes. Some of them lost their jobs.
Then in 1979, prices at the pump soared again when Iranian oil production dropped after the Iranian Revolution, and OPEC almost tripled oil prices. And of course, the fallout helped knock Jimmy Carter right out of the White House. American presidents have been bedeviled by OPEC ever since, until now.
Which is one of the reasons why we should not be relying on friggin' oil to power our infrastructure, our industries. And when I say power our industries, I mean we rely on it to transport goods and services and people. So how, just from a logical standpoint, okay, it was the 1970s, we didn't have the same technology that we did today, except we did. There is evidence, growing evidence, that we could have had a completely electric, clean energy grid by now in the United States from as far back as 1919. One of the first Model T cars was an electric vehicle, a fully electric car. Now, imagine if we had 105 years of electric vehicle innovation instead of petrol innovation. We wouldn't have ever been in that situation. And we wouldn't need to aid and abet Israel and their war crimes against Palestinians so we could get access to $500 billion of natural gas. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that part out loud? It is a national security subject and necessity to divest our need of oil in our country. I don't care if it's just foreign or domestic oil. We need to get rid of that stuff in general. We need to reduce our dependence on it entirely. Eliminate our dependence on oil as a national security defense risk, because that's exactly what it is. Now we're losing the petrodollar. That's gonna hurt. That is gonna hurt in some way. There it is. And if we're not gonna fill up our reserves or release the reserves, then we're definitely gonna suffer. And if we're not prepared to completely push for electric or hybrid or alternative fuels, we're going to suffer in the short term and the long term. Let's see if I can just refresh. Dang it. Hold on. Chat viewer, yeah? Come on. Refresh. All right, let's do that. Not a fan of monarchy, but King Fahad was a champion for boycotting oil to the U.S. in 1973. Well, again, it goes to the U.S. imperialism. Like, if we have been invading countries for their resources, then it would come to no surprise that they would prevent us from getting those resources in times of peace. But it goes again to further the point that we need to divest our reliance on oil in general, because then that won't ever be a problem.
Because to quote former congressional advisor Matt Stoller, Joe Biden just broke OPEC. And he did that through a truly incredible bit of oil market trading. Here's how The Economist describes it. In 2022, when he released 180 million barrels of crude, he sold at an average of $95 a barrel. In July last year, when oil was at $67 a barrel, he began to refill the reserve. He has replaced about 1/5 of what he sold, posting a profit of $582 million, and has managed to time the market to perfection. And Biden's...
That sounds like insider trading, but also that sounds like doing somewhat of the right thing. However, we are still reliant upon it, and there's all sorts of burgeoning technologies: hydrogen, electric, hybrid, and of course, thorium. We should be doing everything in our power to... Honestly, I'm not a big fan of subsidies, giving corporations tax dollars to do things, because most of them end up just giving it right back to shareholders. However, if we could attach, actual stipulations to the money and be like, nope, you need to make every single vehicle electric and affordable now, and help modernize the electrical grid in our roadways to accommodate the new fleets of vehicles that are being built, we'll give you billions of dollars. Otherwise, we will throw your entire board in prison for embezzlement or something. This isn't rocket science.
Streak is still going. Here to explain it all is Dan Dickert. He's one of the foremost experts on oil and energy markets, founder of the Energy Word newsletter. And back in October 2022, he really called this whole thing in a piece titled, "Joe Biden is the greatest oil trader ever." This has gotten very little coverage. I think it's a wild story.
Great.
Take us back to the origins of this.
Right. So 2 years ago, what we had was the most bullish oil market I had seen in 40 years.
Bullish meaning prices are high.
Prices are they're going to go higher, because what you had is you're coming out of a pandemic. You've got this demand, this pent-up demand. People want to go travel.
The execution of an American newspaper columnist, various other human rights violations, goes back, does what American presidents do. Hey, buddy, we need the oil.
We need the oil. And MBS tells him.
Right. I remember that. Do you remember that? Saudi Arabia beheaded an American journalist, and instead of doing anything remotely to hold that accountable, the president was like, hey, my bad, can we have oil now? That's disgusting. And again, maybe that's his hands being tied. Hey, if we lose Saudi oil, we're just screwed as a country. Again, that is a national security defense risk. If we're reliant upon foreign oil to do our whatever we do here, that's a problem. And if we can produce our own energy sources, then why aren't we doing that? Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe, and we can get it from city water. And when it's combusted, it turns into water again, meaning it is if not infinite, but pretty damn close to infinitely renewing itself resource. Yes, right now our factory and manufacturing are not reliant upon hydrogen, and in order to get it, you'd have to do this to then get it, to make it, to do this, to do that. And until we can get the cycle to revolve around using hydrogen as the primary source, by, building enough infrastructure to where it is running on its own, yeah, it's going to take some time, money, effort, resources. But then when we do, guess what? We don't ever have to worry about foreign resources, foreign oil ever again. And it's just, I don't know how else to hit that point home. I think the rest of this is just going to be talking about the stock market aspect of it, the trading, and that bores me, so I can only imagine. Why do you think we've never invested in refineries so that we can use domestic oil? Not that I think we should, but I'm surprised that we haven't. Could it be that the MIC wants us to keep having these wars for oil? It's the only thing that makes sense. Well, we do have rigs. We do have refineries. It's just, I don't know that the United States production is enough to cover our needs, and that's why we are trading with Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. That, and it could just be that the Saudi infrastructure and processing is so fine-tuned and abundant that it is simpler to trade. One of the interesting economic discussions is, if Russia makes steel and America trades steel, why would America buy Russian steel? Well, it's because maybe Russia's steel is slightly less good than American steel, but they can make it faster and they can make more of it, so it's cheaper. So America would buy Russian steel, and then Russians would buy food or whatever from America, and that's how international trade goes. Yeah, I'm not saying we don't sell our oil. I'm saying that's how that would work. We make a product, they make a product, the same product. Ours is maybe higher quality, lesser quality. Theirs is higher or lesser. But because of the differences, it's worth trading. Does that make sense? Let's see. Actually, after the 1973 oil boycott incident, the U.S. has relied very little on importing U.S. oil. The reason why the U.S. is closely tied to Saudi, my suspicion, is that it is to protect the royal family, which serves the West and Israel. They don't want an anti-Western leadership in Saudi like Iran importing. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I want to be in this office, and I have my opinions on Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. But I don't know the history, to be fair. To be a historian with that kind of knowledge on every single interaction America has with other countries would be a feat, to say nothing else. But it is obvious that our ties to Saudi Arabia are for stability and for our own interests. It's not necessarily that we need their oil, but it obviously helps. And there's a reason why gas in America is so cheap versus in literally every other part of the world. And I would imagine part of that would have to do with Saudi oil or our own oil reserves. Let's see. Something that we haven't covered yet, but I think is very important that we need to cover, talking about silenced voices. And in fact, nope, we shouldn't do the article. We should, in fact, do the interview. Brianna Joy Gregg was fired from The Hill for her pro-Palestinian views and commentary on the show. She was later, obviously, interviewed to give her side of the story. We probably don't have time to do all of it. But she was an extremely outspoken leftist. She is one of the least problematic leftists that are in the mainstream that I can think of. And the fact that they silenced her or deplatformed her is very concerning. But I hope she finds her place with some other organization very quickly, which we might even find out here. Yeah, we can do that. Saudi oil trade to the U.S. The United States imported roughly 456,000 barrels of crude per day from Saudi Arabia in 2022. Figures have notably decreased since 2000, while crude oil imports of Canada have increased in the same time period. The United States is Saudi Arabia's second largest trading partner, and Saudi Arabia is one of the United States' largest trading partners in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is the third leading source of imported oil for the United States, providing about 500,000 barrels per day to the market. But what does that amount to? Let's see. percent of U.S. oil trade in Saudi oil. It looks like 5% is from Saudi Arabia. Okay. So it certainly isn't a reliance at this point, but then it begs the question, why did we bend over backwards for Saudi Arabia then so much, other than for having an ally in the Middle East?
Brianna Joy Gray was not even the first person fired by The Hill for criticizing Israel. In October of 2022, Jacobin, the left-wing magazine, reported on a case of Katie Halper, who herself is a Jewish journalist. She had been also working for the same program where Brianna was fired from yesterday, called Rising. And there you see left-wing journalist Katie Halper has been fired for calling Israel an apartheid state. Are you allowed in the United States to call Israel an apartheid state? We've shown you many times before that in September of 2023, a month before the October 7th attack, a source of indignation and contempt and hatred on the part of the pro-Israel faction in the United States. I'm always delighted to speak with Brianna, and tonight is no exception. Brianna, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me, Glenn, and thank you, I have to say, for being just so consistent on this particular issue, especially when so many others have demonstrated that there is a free speech exception that is very much Israel-shaped.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, one of the things I've always tried to argue when I've been defending people on the right who are fired or censored or otherwise punished for their views is that it doesn't matter whether you like that person, whether you like their views. What matters is the principle that you want to affirm. Do you want to live in a society in which people are required to recite certain ideological orthodoxies in order to be heard in media, to keep their job in journalism? Or do you want to live in a society where there's actually free speech, where people are deliberately summary dismissal?
And I text her several times saying, look, I don't need to have a conversation with you. Can you just clarify that one point? It's so I can start talking about this publicly. You know what I mean? So no, to date, I've heard from nobody except for Robbie, who has been on vacation and who is frustrated by all of this as well.
And to be clear, Robbie, it's Robbie Sawabi, who's your co-host, with whom you have a lot of disagreements, including on Israel.
Right. Yes, very publicly on the show. That's the whole point of the show. But behind the scenes, off camera, he's very supportive of our of what we're trying to do on the show, of the project, of the show itself, and is very protective of it, and was very frustrated and disappointed in the actions that The Hill took. But I want to add some more context. I have been under a great deal of pressure for months and months now to tone down my Israel coverage at Rising.
And that is the difference between silencing speech and deplatforming. She was being pressured to not speak by her employer, which has the control over the platform, right? And to the point where she was refusing to stand down from her speaking about Israel and their ongoing war crimes, she eventually got deplatformed. But the problem is that speaking out against injustice should be in of itself protected no matter what. By all means. Exactly. Freedom of speech. Freedom to say what we tell you to say. And that's unacceptable in America. That's just unacceptable. And that's the status quo in news and even in politics. In fact, one of the reasons why I probably did struggle so much and did not make it into any of the debates is because I was very pro-Palestine and anti-Israel when I was getting interviewed. I was probably interviewing, I think my peak was like 5 or 6 interviews in a single week over the course of 2 months. But whenever Israel and Palestine came up, I always stood my ground. And because of that, they probably never aired the interview. Because of that, even if they did air the interview, they probably used it as a way to disparage against me. And those interviews were conducted in a circle that did not necessarily support my views. So it was an easy way to bury me. And that's consequences of free speech, but yet we can bury support and empathy of a disenfranchised people and will be silenced. Yet if we want to talk about sexism, racism, discrimination, intolerance, we'll get put on Fox News and give 5, 10, 15 minutes of airtime. Real question. Where does full freedom of speech actually exist? I think it's a myth, and I would agree. Show me a country where you can say whatever you want and not be silenced, right? That isn't to say, no, you can't say something without consequences, right? Obviously, if you promote Hitler or something, yeah, there should be consequences. But to truly be able to challenge your government and the policy of your government, I don't know that that actually exists. I don't know that you can actually criticize a policy without having ramifications. And that's a problem. That is a problem, especially when the policy that you're criticizing is genocide. How the hell should that result in you losing your job? Shouldn't that result in changed policy?
It started, I think, really in earnest about 6 months ago or so, when there was a radical shift in the staff at the Hill, where basically every single person who worked there was either fired or pushed out. The work environment was so difficult that they chose to leave, basically. And as new staff replaced them, particularly new producers who exerted much more editorial control over the content than had ever been exerted before, they particularly put a lot of scrutiny on coverage of Israel and started to refer to our coverage as an Israel block. So we do about 8 to 12 blocks, segments a day. And they started to refer to this idea of an Israel block, where we could only do one segment on Israel. And as you can imagine, Glenn, given the plethora of stories that come out on a daily basis, some of them are domestic politics issues, some of them are straight news reporting about whatever bombing campaign most recently happened in, let's say, Rafah. Some of them are about the choice to have Netanyahu come to speak to Congress. You might have a story about what happened on a college campus protest. You might have a story on and on and on. You could easily do 12 segments on Israel.
That's disturbing. We'll hit that in just a second. Some Americans trash on countries like mine for freedom of speech, which is a real issue. But you also have this in the United States, which is also true. And as she enumerated, her boss basically said you can only talk about Israel 1 out of your 12 segments, which I don't know how long her segments were. 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. 30 minutes or an hour is definitely not enough time to cover. And as she said, right now there could be some sort of breaking news about Israel committing yet another atrocity. America aiding and abetting yet another atrocity. And that's her job to report. So to be arbitrarily, what's the word? Hamstrung is ridiculous. And again, journalism is protected by the First Amendment. Journalism, her job, what she does, well, in this scene right here. What she does is journalism. That is her job. And that is protected in the First Amendment, that the freedom of the press shall be guaranteed, right? And then the press itself suppresses itself. That is the problem. That is one of the many problems. Like, it's hard enough for the government to be like, hey, we're going to regulate the press so that you're not, spouting Nazi propaganda, or that you're at least able to call yourself the news by meeting these criteria. It's even worse to say, like, okay, we have to at least make sure that you are allowed to report on the news that can criticize us. And the fact that that doesn't exist, or there's no protections, or that they're doing it to themselves, is egregious. It's almost like you have to implement a free journalist legislation or executive order that, like, you cannot fire journalists for reporting the truth or for criticizing foreign policy or the administration, or even your own business policy. You cannot pick and choose what's reality. And maybe it's time to have that conversation. Come on.
Israel every day. And they were segments that were very popular with rising audience. Unlike some other, I've been on the other side of that, right? I've had to talk about issues that I'm I'm the foil for, I'm the heel for with that particular very ideologically mixed audience. But on Israel, it was a double header of a lot of clicks, earns money for the company, and is also something that's very newsy, and is something that ideologically I personally cared a lot about. And yet, unlike other subjects that were very newsy, let's say when we talked about a lot of COVID coverage, talked about some culture issues with trans issues and the like, there was never the same resistance to covering it as much as the audience wanted as there was when it came to Israel.
So I think there are two important things to note here.
Which is definitely the hallmark of propaganda, right? If the empire says no and then prevents you from doing it, guess what? And of course, we can speculate, was the Hill pressured by the federal government? Maybe. I'm sure there's some grant or whatever that they could lose out on if the government so decides. But the point being, it's taboo to talk about Israeli war crimes while Israel is committing war crimes. But it's perfectly okay to condemn Hamas for any little slight that they may have committed over the past 70 years. Or it's okay to condemn other things, but not this guy. Like, the fact that we are not able to paint genocide with the same brush to every country that commits it is extremely disturbing to me. So, and I don't want to cut Brianna short there. Obviously, she's pretty much covered it. They silenced her in the most effective manner possible by firing her. So that does cover all of the major issues that I wanted in the stream. I did want to play one more video, and I think we'll finish it out. 11:22. I think we will finish it out with this.
Good leaders challenge people to be their
Jansen.
best.
Remembered as the
Cyrus Jansen is a content creator that I respect quite a lot, and he focuses a lot on foreign policy issues. He does a lot of good research. I think he does pretty good video content. Just in general, it's informative and it's engaging. And what he did is China and BRICS launch new digital currency. What happens to US dollar now? And I think this is going to be a very informative video. We might not get through all of it in the time that we have left, but we'll get through as much as we can because this kind of correlates to the crisis in the Middle East and our now extremely waning influence in the Middle East, let alone respect from the world, just in general, the world community. Yeah, and you're right, they would condemn Hamas for a fart in the wind. I'm actually shocked that hasn't been an article.
Of the US dollar. And what the US government is doing right now is so dangerous, it literally will change the entire future of our world. Now, I know many people might think that the dollar being replaced as the global currency is just a myth. I mean, that's exactly what this Business Insider article reported last month, telling the world there is no big shift away from the US currency. But according to JP Morgan's head of global commodities, 1/5 of global oil trade used non-dollar currencies in 2023. Now, using foreign currencies for 20% of oil trade is a huge number, considering the fact that just a few years ago, the US government had an almost complete monopoly on the oil market with the petrodollar. But the 16,000 US sanctions levied against Russia have proved completely useless and only accelerated more countries' desire to shift away from the US dollar for trade. Now, one of those countries...
Now, that is one of the points I was hoping he was bringing up. So, when you sanction one country because you don't like them, and you don't like the way they're doing and conducting business in their affairs, while you have committed 20 years of a global war on terror effort throughout the Middle East with a monopoly on oil trade, it tends to rub other countries the wrong way. And this is true. On top of that, the sanctions weren't having that much of an effect on Russia. It was reported as if they were, but the reality is Russia didn't collapse. And now they're doing what America's doing by being imperialists in Ukraine, but still, the fact that the US dollar has been waning, the fact that the US influence has been waning, is because of our actions. And again, that's one of the reasons why I want to focus on diplomacy as president of the United States, not aggression and not ferocity. Again, if we can build relationships, establish peace, and create better trade opportunities through technology or investment or improving our own resources at home, it would give us more leverage in trade rather than trying to take other people's resources and either selling it back to them or their neighbors. That just sets a bad precedent.
This simple quote: de-dollarization will be a slow process until it isn't. Which also reminds me of another famous quote from Ernest Hemingway's 1926 novel, The Sun Also Rises. How did you go bankrupt? 2 ways: gradually, then suddenly. Once you remove yourself from the US media bubble and start to pay attention to what countries around the world really want, you'll quickly see that de-dollarization is not a myth, but something that governments around the globe are actively working towards. This October, the BRICS alliance will announce a new commodity-backed currency during its annual summit. But unlike the euro, which replaced currencies of individual countries, this new BRICS currency will be backed by gold and used exclusively for trade while preserving the sovereign currency of its members.
Now, we had our economic discussion earlier in the stream about, who says gold is worth anything, but in reality, in the way our economies work across the countries and internationally, gold has value. Okay, fine. So gold has value. Now they're going to establish a means of trade using a different form of currency backed by gold to engage in international trade while keeping their own sovereign money not tied or changed by that. That's powerful. That is extremely powerful. That means that South America and everybody in BRICS is literally going to improve their financial standing by doing this. And they're going to be competitive against America as a group, just like the EU is competitive against America as a group. And China is becoming competitive on its own because it's massive. And India will be growing its GDP over the years as well because it's massive. And so what we're going to see is that there's going to be about 6 major blocks. Hopefully Africa forms one soon and kicks all of the Western power influence out of their countries and homelands so that they can start benefiting from their natural resources and trade. Until then, it's going to be 6 major powers: the United States, China, Russia more or less, the OPEC, Euro, and now, or the European Union, and now BRICS. These 6 major powers are going to dominate global trade, which goes back to what you were actually saying, AZV, is that we keep heading towards more and more homogeny, more and more collectiveness. But those things that still separate us are deep-seated fears, hatreds, and misgivings, because historically, we have been bad actors to each other, or they have been bad actors to themselves. And so until we can truly focus on trade and building peace and diplomatic relations rather than conquest and control, we're just going to continue building on this. But now we are consolidating our resources, consolidating our power structures into these 6 spheres, which has been alluded to in other dystopian novel writing, like 1984, right? The major war, the big war between the 3 major powers of the world. Now we're heading to 6 major powers. Eventually it might be 3. And then what? And then what? Until we can stop trying to be aggressors and to control everything, and that's not just America, that's every other bloc. Until we can start working together for the common collective good, we are always going to risk war and conflict. And that is only ever going to be detrimental to us as a people, as a species, never mind the individual countries.
Something that some other countries can trust and are going to back, like they do the U.S. dollar. But they've sold a lot. The first quarter of this year, they sold $53 billion. And it might not sound like a lot, but they're holding $800 billion. And that first quarter represents 6.5% of their holdings. So if they continue to do that, we're at 25% of their holdings that they're liquidating by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that people don't realize is that, China was the largest holder of U.S. debt several years ago, and it has been a very systematic moves from China. It's been very gradual, it's been very slow, but, they were well over $1 trillion. Like you said, it's now down to 800 billion. And that is a staggering amount, if it's, equivalent to 6% in the first quarter. And we see a direct correlation with the gold as well, because I think this is what's interesting is I know you and I both follow the gold market very closely, but we saw 2022, there was record amount of central banks around the world purchasing gold. We saw the same thing in 2023. And then here we are almost in direct correlation with China dumping these 53 billion. We've also seen central banks around the world continue this buying spree. So we've seen them once again, we're off to a very hot start in 2024. So this trend of buying gold and really trying to hold this as an asset, it's been going on for 3 years now with central.
And that brings us to the major conversation. Like, I do want to see this the conversation about digital currency actually, but this trend of getting away from the US dollar, buying gold, buying material assets, and having your currency backed by a precious metal. Like, this is the trend that's happening, which means American influence is waning, which means we have two choices: improve our trade and our relationships, or be more aggressive militaristically. And what have we chosen to do? Does the US intend to combat de-dollarization? Oh, I imagine so, but so far, Joe Biden and his administration have done very little to achieve it. As president, this is what I would do. If I was serious about de-dollarization and putting an end to it, this is exactly what I would do. I would issue an international apology for the various crimes that have been committed by American leaders and the unregulated industries that have facilitated those actions by American leaders. I would further pass initiatives such as accountability legislation or executive orders, and hold those bad actors criminally accountable. By taking those necessary actions, I would regain some meager amount of trust from the international community. At least they would see that I'm willing to follow up my words, to back up the intent of my words, of holding bad actors accountable. And from there, I would and trade negotiations specifically with those nations that we have soured relations with. Now, granted, I also have ethics standards. I would not want to regain my standing with Saudi Arabia because they have human rights violations. But certainly we could re-engage Russia and China and other countries that we have been neglecting. I would also want to facilitate the independence of African nations to build their own economies without the dependence of Western powers. These are the steps that we would take to encourage and show partnership and true international commitment as partners, as friends, as equals, rather than as conquerors and as imperialists. But that bridge has been burnt a while ago. True, it has been burnt. But the gap that existed that bridge crossed in the first place is still there, even if it's grown. And so we have to build a bigger bridge, a stronger bridge, but you still have to try. And the thing is, you can't do it without taking honest efforts, steps towards doing it. And yes, that's why I said earlier too, if I become president and I even get my 2 terms, what about the next guy? So not only would I have to make those steps and make those agreements and get that ball rolling, I'd have to protect them in such a way that the next guy could not usurp them or dismantle them or in other ways disrupt them. And those would be my challenges, not necessarily the trade, not necessarily rebuilding relationships, but rather keeping them in place once I'm gone, whether that's after 4 or 8 years. But it is absolutely necessary. Let's see. Can we get to
banks? It's not slowing down at all.
No, it's speeding up, and that's why we're at record highs. And Business Insider today came out with an article that says the U.S. dollar has become so weaponized that central banks are snapping up politically neutral
What's this
gold.
Cryptocurrency?
So there's so many different countries that are taking a look at this.
It's hard to be an HR leader. Pet insurance. People love pets.
We could relax this, including Saudi Arabia, which we've had an incredible relationship with a petrodollar with since the 1970s. That is a tipping point. When you start moving the population over 50% that would like to move to a different world reserve currency,
this is
the
what I
United
was
States
looking at. Major development: Saudi Arabia joined CBDC M-Bridge to end US dollar dominance. I don't know who
Hello,
Lena
everyone. I hope
is.
you're doing well today. Thank you so much for tuning in. It was announced that Saudi Arabia joined a CBDC project, M-Bridge, which is a massive, truly massive experiment that is led by the Bank for International Settlements. Saudi Arabia is moving full steam ahead. It is joining Project M-Bridge as a full participant after being an observing member. One important feature is M-Bridge does not support US dollar payments. And while there appear to be many speculations that this move will end the petrodollar as we know it, I'm actually of the opinion.
I did. We're running out of time, and by running out of time, it's not that I wouldn't continue the stream. It seems like we have some good lighting, so that's not an issue. But I don't know that my throat can handle it. To be perfectly honest. So that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to stick to the 3-hour mark. I'm not physically ready or able to do 4 hours of nonstop talking, which is funny because as president, I wouldn't have to do that, thankfully, but there would be lots of traveling, lots of typing, emails, probably have aides to help with all that fun stuff. But yes, I was aware that Turkey is joining BRICS. It's another one of the major things. Let's see, it's right here. And it's also by Cyrus Jansen. Turkey just changed the entire future of Europe with this one move. And so, again, Turkey being a potential Middle Eastern partner, because that's where it is, as well as its natural resources trade, it could make a huge impact on BRICS, but also the European Union and that theater, that Middle Eastern European theater. So there's just so much going on. Like what happened over the weekend was so mass. Like, honestly, we could probably continue talking about this tomorrow for the whole week. That's how much stuff happened this weekend. And God knows what's going to happen tomorrow. Because, I mean, today was just dealing with the ramifications of what happened over the weekend. Never mind the events from today. In fact, maybe it would be more interesting to see what the news is for just today. What happened? So we've got oh, that's right. There were 2 Israeli ministers who resigned as well. Like, we didn't even get to that. Let's see. Take TYT with a grain of salt, obviously. I don't like the way they behave.
4 cabinet ministers have resigned. The most important one is Benny Gantz, former chief of staff for the Israeli military, former defense minister, and one of the
guy who was
3
doing a lot of
voting
the
members of the war cabinet. This has huge implications. Now, it could be great news, but unfortunately, it could also be bad news for reasons that I'm going to explain. But that's not all. On top of that, Brigadier General Avi Rosenfeld, the commander of Israel military's Gaza division, has also resigned. Now, that's a lot of resignations shaking up the Israeli government at a moment that it definitely needs shaking up. Is it going to make a difference? And why did they resign? So, number one, on Rosenfeld, that one, it doesn't appear to be political as far as I can see. I don't know, micro level details of Israeli military and political operations, but he's saying that he, quote, failed in his life's mission to defend Israeli communities bordering Gaza. So that sounds like that's a pretty honorable thing to do for a military guy who doesn't have to say that. Like, has Netanyahu ever said that he failed to protect Israelis? No, of course not. And he doesn't acknowledge it. He says, oh, we'll talk about it after the war is over, but it doesn't look like he's ever planning to end the war. So that's his way of avoiding responsibility. Whereas General Rosenfeld here is accepting responsibility and stepping down. As far as I can tell, it doesn't look like a political move. And whenever anyone takes responsibility, look, obviously, I'm not going to. I got no love for anyone in the IDF. It's not, especially, look, the lower level soldiers are, I've seen some of the videos, awful, etc. But a lot of them are drafted. You don't know who agrees with the war, who doesn't agree with the war.
Yeah. Okay. That's a fair thing to say. But you know who was also drafted into the war? The Nazis. And you know what was not an excuse? Blindly following orders. So there's that. So there were major political and military leadership that resigned from Israel, from Israeli leadership and positions. And so this clearly showcases that either A, they see the writing on the wall that if they stick to this, that whatever crimes they've already been complicit in committing, aiding or abetting, are only going to be exacerbated and compounded once this comes to light and does make it to the International Criminal Court. And they don't want to be summarily executed. They want to have at least some opportunity to defend themselves, their family, their livelihood, what have you. It could also be that they weren't extreme enough for the Netanyahu administration, and therefore are being asked to resign to be replaced by more zealotous members who will froth at the mouth with more wanton abandon and actually follow through on the genuine acts of genocide without trying to hide them. I believe that's obviously where Cenk is going with that.
Leadership is what matters. So he's leadership in the IDF. So, you know, I'm never going to defend him as a human being, but this particular move seems to be honorable. So that, for what it's worth. Now, the much more important stuff is Benny Gantz, and then the second minister is also from his same party, Gadi Eisenkot. He was also part of the war cabinet, but he did not have a vote. There's voting members and non-voting members, and there was only 3 voting members: Benjamin Netanyahu, Benny Gantz, who just resigned, and Yoav Gallant, who is defense minister. So Gallant is enormously important here in this equation. We're going to come back to him as well. So now, when Gantz resigns, is he likely to run against Netanyahu later? Yes. Is he the more moderate person? Yes. Is he a moderate in the scope of the world? Not at all. Everyone in the war cabinet is, in my opinion, massively right-wing and just killed 37,000 people without blinking an eye. So I have absolutely no love for Benny Gantz. So that he's going to have to live with that shame. If you want to contribute or become a member through TYT, 200 people. That's what the Gaza Health Ministry is reporting. The Israeli Defense Forces are saying at least 100. So given the track record of both of those organizations, more likely to be closer to 200. It's still early on, so that we don't have a final number. Would I have killed 200 people to save 4? As much as I want to save those 4 with all my heart, no, I'm not going to kill 200 people to save 4. You would only do that if you think the other 200 lives are worthless, irrelevant. And that's what the Israeli cabinet thinks of Palestinians. They don't think they're human beings. So they think we killed 200 flies to rescue 4 human beings. Who cares about killing those non-humans?
And I think that's pretty much the rest of his video is bashing that, which we all would agree with. However, that's a bit no need to add more platform for that. It is true that the Israeli government has issued official statements, or at least members of the government have issued official statements that they want to erase Palestinians from existence, that they do view them as less than human beings, as animals no less, which is, of course, exactly what the Nazis said about the Jews in the first place, which is reprehensible. And to a degree, dehumanization is one of the first tactics used in propaganda to ensure that your population supports whatever war effort. We dehumanized the Middle East by calling all Arabs and Middle Easterners, Muslims, terrorists, and saying that Islam is a terrorist religion. We did that for 20 years. And the ramifications of that are still being felt here at home and abroad. So the fact that it's happening still from one of our allies is not shocking. That being said, only time will tell to see what is going to happen next in Israel with these resignations. Maybe Netanyahu finally does get challenged, and maybe this does result in a cessation of aggression. Or it could be the exact opposite, where those resignations get replaced with even more zealous sociopaths. Let's see. I used to be a big fan. No, not so much. But of course, he is a human being on Palestine. He's great on Palestine. He's okay. His political positions are decent. Sometimes he gets too crazy with the yelling and screaming. That's one of the reasons why I don't like Hassan, and one of the reasons why I don't like most of the streamers and YouTubers who do political content anyway, because they usually lose their minds, whether it's right or left wing. It's like, yes, you can get angry, but get angry with conviction. As president, I will hold Israel accountable for their myriad crimes against humanity and the acts of genocide committed against Palestine. That's angry. That's forceful. It's genuine. And I don't have to scream and rant and rave to do it. And it's still effective. This reminds me of when Pierce pressed the IDF guy on civilian casualties. That was great. Yeah, he's not interesting to watch, Cenk. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I get that I might not be that interesting to watch either. And I'm trying to balance talking about serious issues and delivering them in a way that is engaging, but not too entertaining to distract from the seriousness of the issues, but also in a way that an audience member would want to watch and come back and keep watching. I always have a basic, unwavering level of respect for people who are humane on Palestine. Listen, you can say I'm engaging all day long, and I can believe you, but I'm saying I'm working on the craft of being engaging and being someone that people will want to watch. Now, saying these are my views and these are the views you should have, I'm not really willing to do that. But I do want to stand by my convictions and encourage people to view my policies and make their own decisions from them. So I do want to promote my ideology and my convictions and my policies and my platform, but I don't want to turn it into like a doctrine, if you will. White guys and their doctrines, am I right? No, it would be white guys and their manifestos. Am I right? And that actually brings us to 3 o'clock. So we made it. I made it. My throat is hanging in there barely. So on that note, I do appreciate all of you viewing. Thank you for sticking with me on my technical difficulties. Hopefully soon I can relocate to better accommodations with fiber optic internet and actually do some really good streams. But for now, we will continue with what we have. We will continue covering major current events, both at home and abroad, and I will continue honing my craft. And as you can see down there below, weekdays from 4 to 7. So on that note, see you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you tomorrow.